Chapter 22. After a friendly discussion between the elven messengers and merchants, they came to an agreement to redeem the captured tribal warriors. The slave merchants also received some cash and other compensation. After purchasing some food and water from the caravan, Brock led the redeemed warriors away from the caravan, as if he didn't want to stay for even a moment longer. As most of the warriors had lost their mounts, the elves didn't travel very quickly. Fortunately, these people were all strong warriors and wouldn't suffer too many casualties from marching on foot in the desert. Teacher Barbarossa, Harknan, who was riding beside the tongue-taker, looked at his expressionless master and wanted to say something. Barbarossa, the orc of sound who had been killed before, was also his master's disciple. Brock only had 2 disciples in total, one of whom had inherited his warrior skills and the other his orc of sound. Now, he was the only one left. However, before he could finish speaking, Brock's anger seemed to explode. His strong hand grabbed the chief's son by the throat and pulled him off his warhorse. He then jumped off his warhorse, his fists raining down on his disciple's body. "You cowardly maggot of a loser like you. What courage and strength do you have to inherit from me? And, if it weren't for the fact that you are his only 2 remaining children, I would have personally ended you. A defeated general who shames the tribe." Fortunately, the supreme warrior accompanying him pulled the furious Blatch away in time. Otherwise, even if he carefully avoided the vital parts, his fist would only hit the body covered with tight muscles. With the monstrous strength of the tongue puller, it was possible that he would have killed Huck Keenan if he wasn't careful. "I declare that you are stripped of your status as a supreme warrior. If you want to have this honor again, you'll have to use 10 times the number of human heads to wash away the shame of being captured. Now, get over there and walk out of this desert on foot with the warriors who were humiliated because of your incompetence." As if his anger hadn't subsided, Brock leaked a trace of his orc of sound and covered the entire elven troop with his strange voice. Looking at the chief's son dragging his bruised and swollen body and limping towards the marching warriors without saying a word, one of the supreme warriors who dissuaded Blatch from beating him patted his old companion on the shoulder. "Stop pretending, old man. If you're really angry, you'll turn that kid into a pile of minced meat with just a few punches." Oomph. Brock seemed to hate having his thoughts seen through. "What do you know? This is how I teach him as a qualified master. I hit him to make him remember. If you can't win, you have to run. This time, you were lucky to be captured. Not everyone needs to be captured. Barbarossa is an example." "Whatever you say, stubborn old man." The supreme warrior seemed to be very familiar with Brock and was not taken aback by this fierce man's arrogance. "This time, we exposed the hidden information of the Blaze Shadow beasts. Well, they know the chief has already fused with the heart of the beasts in the Blaze Shadow beast nest. This terrible cursed weapon will be put to use soon. The wisdom of the Samhain tribe has seen the horror of this weapon from the battlefield. Only Hadger of Salem can be the master of the desert elves." Ignoring the supreme warrior beside him, Brock jumped on his warhorse and urged the troop to continue forward. The supreme warrior had no choice but to jump on his own mount. As one of the few elven warriors who knew the inside story of the Blaze Shadow beast's secret weapon, the supreme warrior was also one of the chief's undulls. He knew what kind of changes this weapon could bring to the current battle and even the entire desert elven tribe. Attacking the Samhain tribe was also to seize the black oil wells that they controlled far more than Salem, and the black oil was the key to limiting the size of the Chimera army. Brock naturally knew this, and in fact he knew more. He knew that in order to control this power, Hadger, who had used his incomplete bloodline to transform and fuse with the heart of the beasts, paid the price of no longer being able to bear children. That was why he was willing to risk the danger and humiliation to redeem Hadgkinen. That was why he restrained his anger and was careful not to kill this disciple who had shamed himself and his undulls. However, what they did not expect was that although the merchant who had negotiated with them was no longer good at using curved swords, he was better at weaving nets. And it just so happened that one of the links of this net was connected to their opponent, the Samhain tribe. After they walked out of the caravan station, Epicurus released an eagle messenger with a letter. Samhain would understand some of the trouble they would encounter before they encountered it on the battlefield. The merchant believed that this letter could get him some more rewards in addition to the ransom. The core of the Dragon Nest territory, the Dragonheart Hall. This was where Sirota rested and met the Megalosaurus who came to visit. Kin like the kobolds had no right to stay here. The legendary Megalosaurus lay on a platform in the depths of the hall. Behind the platform was the secret room where he stored his treasures. 132 times, the old dragon counted silently in his heart. This was the 132nd time that he had the urge to kill this little bastard in front of him in just 2 hourglasses. He did not seem to be listening at all to the content of this insignificant dragonkin's rambling and draconic. In fact, just the pretentious appearance of this little dragonkin in front of him made the legendary Megalosaurus extremely unhappy. What made Sirota unhappy was that this creature with the false name of God-Eater was a relatively powerful descendant of the evil dragons. However, it was far from being a match for the legendary Megalosaurus, who was about to reach the age of an extremely old dragon. This difference was not only reflected in the ability of spellcasting. Even if it was only based on physical strength, a descendant of the evil dragons with the class of barbarian and over 20 centimeters in size would not be a match for the old dragon that was 5 times its size. There is also a difference between legendary and legendary. Enough, you ignorant and noisy little bastard. The old dragon's patience had reached its limit. The dragon tail strike came before the sound. However, this descendant of the evil dragons was still a legendary warrior. Although it was not a good sight to behold, it still managed to dodge Sirota's attack by a hair's breadth. Sirota, are you going to reject the call of the great dragon queen, the 5-headed Megalosaurus Tiamat? You! The legendary Megalosaurus' thunderous breath directly interrupted the descendant of the evil dragons before he could finish his words. The God-Eater had extremely high resistance to lightning. Although the electric shock burned him, it did not completely incapacitate him. However, Sirota's huge front claws took advantage of this gap and firmly grasped him in the palm of his hand. Unlike the Drakons, the first descendant of the evil dragons was created by an ancient dragon mask that was close to a weak divine power that was loyal to Tiamat. The original individual of this life did not come from heredity. Instead, it used non-dragon blood and a special ritual to hatch a dragon egg that was already dead, giving birth to a new monster with dragon characteristics. The first dead dragon eggs were provided by the colorless Megalosaurus that was loyal to the Dragon Queen. As time passed, each descendant of the evil dragons formed a new race, and their tempers were very similar to the dragons that were similar to them. The ritual to create the first descendant of the evil dragons was recorded in many ancient books, so that new types could still be created. However, due to unknown reasons, only the red dragon, the black dragon, and the blue dragon were the most numerous descendant of the evil dragons. The last descendant of the red dragon, the flame weaver, was a huge beast that looked like a sauropod dinosaur with some intelligence. This cumbersome creature could spit out balls of fire and burn a single target to ashes. When faced with close-range attacks, it would display the savagery of the red dragon. At the same time, it was too slow to escape from most threats, so it would fight until it was killed and then explode in an attempt to take the enemy down with it. The last descendant of the black dragon, the net weaver, this creature appeared in abandoned caves. It had a slender body similar to the black dragon and looked like a large spider with scales and a tail. It liked to catch and eat unlucky people that passed by. It could not spit acid like the black dragon, but it could weave acid into a net. Although its corrosive power was much weaker than that of the Megalosaurus, it was more than enough to cause more trouble and pain to the opponent. In fact, it was a habit of relying on its stealth ability to stay hidden, and then use collision charge to charge an opponent. After dealing a physical blow to the opponent, the net would exhaust the prey's last bit of strength. The last descendant of the blue dragon, the God-Eater, to be honest, was the most powerful of the last descendant of the evil dragons. Even if it was defeated by Sirota in an instant, this monster still had the power to destroy a city. They were used to wielding large swords to attack, and could use a few of the blue dragon's spell-like abilities. The last descendant of the blue dragon, the God Eater, was originally created to fight against the angels, dragons, and dragon descendants who were loyal to the good dragon god Bahamut. However, they were much smarter than the other last descendant of the evil dragons, and were very good at pleasing the Dragon Queen. Currently, a small number of them were also taking on the role of the Dragon Queen's servants, performing tasks such as envoys. The last descendant of the evil dragons were originally hatched from dead dragon eggs, so they did have some of the dragon's genetic characteristics. Moreover, although their growth potential was not comparable to that of a real megalosaurus, and their strength basically reached the limit of an adult megalosaurus, they did not need to go through the period of being weak in young dragons. They only needed to be born with the strength of a young dragon. Although they inherited some of the dragon's characteristics, and were not a species that could reproduce quickly compared to the megalosaurus, they formed a population much faster. In all fairness, this species was more qualified to be a subordinate of the evil dragon god. However, Sarota hated this kind of creature, and there were many megalosaurus who had the same attitude as him. Although the blue dragon was an evil megalosaurus that was in the lawful camp, the mother of the 5 color dragons, the 5-headed dragon god, Tiamat, and even maintained a belief that was above the baseline. However, this kind of monster that was originally produced from dead dragon eggs made many old megalosaurus think of Dracolic, skeletal dragon, and other creatures that would fly into a rage just by hearing about them. For example, although Sarota was an evil blue dragon, the nature of the population allowed him to bring back keys, who had nothing to do with him, to hatch and raise him. Chapter 23. In the end, reason prevailed over emotional factors. Sarota used the spell Force Cage to control the last descendant of the blue dragon, the Godslayer, who he hated so much. He took the war mobilization order brought by the messenger of the Dragon Queen and looked at it. The conscription order was not issued by Tiamat herself. It might have been made by a powerful primordial dragon who acted as her advisor on behalf of the Dragon Queen. The dragon used its own scale as a carrier to record information that could be accurately identified by its own kind. Holding this scale, Sarota could feel that the primordial dragon who issued the order on behalf of the Dragon Queen was likely to have a certain bloodline relationship with Sarota, but it was not strong. They were definitely not blood relatives within 3 generations. The content of the order was as follows. To the legendary megalosaurus Sarota, I am Lord Tiamat's subordinate, the 3rd member of the Evil Dragon Council, Heaven's Blade Zaffel, your 6th ancestor. According to the bloodline contract, the Blue Dragon clan of the Dragon's Lair is summoned to fulfill the Evil Dragon Covenant. Within 200 hourglasses after receiving the conscription order, you are to bring all the descendants of your clan who are close to the standard of an adult megalosaurus to the Pillar of Skulls of Avernus. The war that belongs to you is about to begin. Junior, remember this. The victors will receive endless rewards. The losers will only embrace death. So, use all your power as much as possible. Do not hide it. Be careful to use it one by one. Be careful to use it one by one. Repeating Zaffel's message, Sarota thought to himself, he probably wants me to be of some use. The experience and knowledge that came with age made Sarota very clear where Avernus and the Pillar of Skulls were. He also knew what the war in the letter referred to. It was probably a terrifying plane that even the worst nightmares could not touch. This was not a sensational thing. Avernus was the first layer of the 9 layers of hell. The entire plain was a scorched wasteland full of rubble. Occasionally, towering mountains and sloping hills broke the monotonous landscape. The climate there was hot, but it was not as dry as the ash world. The blood that flowed from some unknown life form covered the earth like a stream and eventually flowed into the Styx River of this plain. The air was filled with a blood-red mist, and fireballs would fall from the sky from time to time. If one's fire resistance was not high enough, or if there was no hole to hide in, the creature hit by the fireball would explode and turn into a pile of decorations on the vast land. As for the skull pillar, it was an unfinished structure that was constantly growing in length and thickness. Chapter 24. Sirota was not stupid. It was not wrong to say that he was a wise old dragon. He did not think highly of himself, nor did he want to be treated as fertilizer. Out of his passion for a comfortable life and his strong survival instincts, the legendary dragon wanted very much to end the little bastard who sent him the letter that pissed him off. Then, he would destroy the letter of the old immortal whose bloodline was unfathomably similar to his own, pretending that he did not know or have never met him. But he could not. After years of study, his casting skills were as proficient as eating and drinking, and it gave him the ability to see through the surface of things. And the contents of the bloodline contract clearly stated in the letter, and Sirota's senses told him that this was not an imaginary threat, but an objective fact. I'm afraid that the ancestors of the Ash world who migrated to this world from other planes had no choice but to compromise with the Dragon Queen due to the pressure of survival, Sirota analyzed rationally. Although he had enough respect for the evil dragon god, the Ash world had not believed in gods for a long time, so the old dragon born in this plane was not as devout as the natives of this world. The contents of this contract are very similar to the style of the 9 prisons of Bader, and even a little like the Styx contract. If I go against it, I'm afraid that the entire dragon nest with my bloodline will be in danger. I can only go to that damned place and risk my life. According to the requirements of the draft order, Sirota, who had become a legendary, needed to lead his army to the first level of Bader, Avernus, to pay homage to the evil dragon god, and serve under him for 100 years. The other adult blue dragon also needed to stay for 20 years. As for the young dragons, they only needed to wait for 1 or 2 years before they could fulfill their promise and return to the dragon nest. But that was Avernus, the front line of the bloody war. Sirota's power that far exceeded that of an ordinary legendary was not worth mentioning there. Powerful beings as strong as demigods or even gods could be annihilated from time to time. The old dragon had the most pessimistic guess that there would be a few of his people who would be lucky enough to survive this war and return. Thinking of this, Sirota looked at the last evil dragon descendant who was struggling in the force field cage, while sneering at the old dragon who had just finished reading the conscription order. The malice in his heart grew even stronger. Old dragon, do you have the courage to face the wrath of the great 5-headed dragon god? Or do you have the courage to face the curse of violating the bloodline contract? Ha ha! The legendary tier blue dragon who had been enraged by the arrogant and rude emissary suddenly calmed down. Then he casually cast a spell and turned himself into a half-dragon that was about the same height as the last evil dragon descendant. Then he approached the force field cage and spoke with an unhurried tone. I have to say that I don't have that kind of strength. Out of respect for the great dragon queen Tiamat, I will definitely abide by this contract and fight for her. With a flick of his finger, the old dragon's unique secret imprint was imprinted on the enlistment order. This was the sign of fulfilling the contract. As the contract was established, the ancient dragon scale that carried the will of Bartho to summon Sirota suddenly shattered into tiny ashes, scattering from the Megalosaurus's palm. Last question. Are you considered strong in your tribe? Are you qualified to personally serve the Dragon Queen and listen to her orders? Sirota's strange question made the evil dragon emissary a little confused. However, he still arrogantly replied, Of course I am a strong warrior. My ranking in the tribe is close to the dozen or so ancestors that were first created. It's just that I haven't received the honor of meeting the great Dragon Queen yet. Wait a little longer. Without waiting for the last evil dragon descendant to finish speaking, the old dragon revealed a look of understanding. The half-dragon's face that resembled a true dragon actually squeezed out a smile. Then goodbye. A long-prepared spell of greater disjunction directly penetrated the force field cage and bombarded the body of the last evil dragon descendant. There was no scream, no flesh and blood. A legendary warrior who was still alive just a moment ago was directly disintegrated into tiny ashes. God Slayer. Is there really such a weak god for you to kill? Ignorant and stupid weak creation. You have tainted the little bloodline inheritance of the true dragon for nothing. If such a weak being could be called strong in the tribe, then the overall strength of the tribe could be imagined. Without the direct favor of the Dragon Queen, it would be a waste of effort to kill him. Sarota knew very well that the evil dragon god was the mother of the Penishade dragons, not the mother of the last evil dragon descendant. After dealing with this annoying fellow, Sarota's mood improved a little. It had been a long time since he cast a spell in battle, but the practice just now did not seem to be unfamiliar with it. Only then would he feel more at ease when he went to a dangerous place like the blood battlefield. "Hey, little guy, what are you doing hiding there? Is there a problem with your patroller?" Sarota did not transform back into his true dragon form. He stretched his half-dragon body as if trying to adapt to this form. He had already noticed Keys, who had come to the Dragonheart Hall. The young dragon walked in from behind the huge door pillar at the entrance of the Dragonheart Hall. Even if he was extraordinarily developed, his true dragon form was not inferior to the average young blue dragon. However, he was still not much taller than a legendary megalosaurus in half-dragon form. What kind of half-dragon is this old dragon's spell mimicking? Don't tell me it's half megalosaurus or half giant. Although he was thinking about some unimportant and boring questions in his mind, he still had to be respectful on the surface. After Keys Fetton stepped into the Dragonheart Hall, he lowered his famous giant head in respect to Sarota. "Respected master of the Dragon Nest, my instructor, Thunder Lord Sarota." Fortunately, the frequency of many syllables in the dragon language could represent different meanings, so the long string of honorifics did not seem too cumbersome. "This is my 26th hunting mission in the Dragon Nest territory. I submit to you a detailed report of this mission." With that, the blue dragon Keys stood up and cast a spell to show his secret imprint. Sarota could use the power of magic to quickly read the report in the secret imprint using the rules he had set in advance. Sarota felt a sense of closeness as he looked at his brethren hatched from the dragon eggs he brought back from his most recent exploration. His direct descendants, who were closest to him by blood, had already left the dragon nest due to their inability to challenge his position as master of the nest. They had no hope of promotion and even left this world to explore their own legendary path and build their own dragon nest. Perhaps in the future, unless he encountered an accident or was unable to face a challenge by himself, he would not be able to meet them again in this life. Although the life of a dragon was long, and creatures who had lived for a long time would slowly become indifferent to family, he was still an extremely old dragon after all. He had not lived for tens of thousands of years like the immemorial dragons, and naturally would not have such an indifferent temperament. The young megalosaurus who stayed in the dragon nest, even the oldest adult dragon, were of his bloodline several generations later. Except for the little dragon in front of him who looked exceptionally sturdy, he was brought back to the dragon nest by Sarota himself and hatched from the egg. In terms of feelings, compared to the older, unfilial children, who were focused on defeating their father to become the master of the nest, this little dragon of his kind, although growing at an astonishing speed, would not threaten his position in the next 1,000 years. Such a Keys was very much loved by Sarota. After briefly checking the information in the secret imprint, Sarota learned that his tribute caravan had been attacked and that other huge beasts that could threaten the dragon nest had been hunted down. He waved his hand to disperse the secret imprint and secretly stared at Keys. He knew that this little guy was hiding something, including the fact that he had found the copper mine and secretly occupied it. But he understood that this was the nature of a blue dragon, secretly accumulating all the power and working hard to become stronger. That was how he had grown up before. However, things were different now. Although he was only a young dragon, Keys, who had the strength of a young dragon, would definitely follow him and lead the powerful dragon nest to Avernus. Perhaps he would encounter more opportunities that belonged to him, but it was more likely that he would meet with misfortune and die prematurely. Thinking that this little dragon was as obsessed with beautiful spells as he was when he was young, Sarota felt that he should teach him something before the expedition to Bator. With a wave of his hand, a huge spellbook was handed to him from the platform where the old dragon often rested. Even though Sarota's half-dragon form had the body of a giant, this spellbook was still too big. The cover of the spellbook was made from the skin of a scroll dragon that Sirota had killed when he became an adult. The small and dense scales that were like fish scales emitted a rainbow light. Flipping open his spellbook, the old dragon found the corresponding page and gently spread out the spellbook's introduction, casting tips, and even the metamagic abilities that he was used to using completely copied the spellbook onto a new scroll. After finishing all this, he carefully closed the book and threw the spellbook to the platform where he rested. He then handed the scroll that recorded the complicated spellbook to the little dragon in front of him. Little dragon, you did a good job patrolling. This is your reward. The ninth circle spell Mordenkainen's Disintegration, also known as the Great Disintegration. This is a powerful spell that was invented by a talented and powerful human spellcaster from another world. But I think that with your wisdom and ability as a blue dragon, you should be able to understand its mysteries. P.S. The Styx contract is one of the higher level contracts in the D&D series. It is of a higher level than the contracts made by ordinary demons. Gods and creatures as powerful as gods will use this contract to make an oath. The price of violating the contract is not something that ordinary weak gods can bear. Chapter 25. Keyes did not expect to see the three Ogre brothers again so soon. After reporting back to Sirota in the Dragonheart Hall, Keyes spent 5 days analyzing the high-grade spell that Sirota had bestowed upon him. This was a rare reward. It was the nature of the blue dragon race to cherish their own things. Even blood relatives rarely had the tradition of sharing precious knowledge. As a reward, the inheritance of Mordenkainen's Disjunction was obviously too generous. This was beyond the limits of the dragon race's inherited knowledge, the ability to cast an 8th circle spell of a higher level. Even as natural magical creatures, dragons had to slowly explore and learn before they could try to master this level of spell ability. Only by mastering knowledge could one truly belong to oneself. Keyes naturally understood this principle. He used the familiar method of categorizing and analyzing documents to learn this 9th circle spell in the shortest time possible. Spell name: Mordenkainen's Disjunction, Sirota's modified version. Spell description: Mordenkainen was not the most powerful of the living mages of Pharaones, but he was the most creative. Almost all spellcasters had heard of his astonishing achievements in the field of magic, and his skills and knowledge in the field of magic and politics were even more widely known. Mordenkainen's Disjunction was an advanced 9th circle spell that he had created based on the 7th circle spell, Disjunction. This powerful 9th circle spell that Sirota had modified was even more powerful. It could achieve a disjunction effect that the original 7th circle spell could not achieve, and at the same time effectively avoided the negative effects of indiscriminate disintegration on enchanted items. In the face of such a spell, ordinary defensive spells would have no effect. If one was accidentally hit by such a spell and had not learned its counterspell, turning into dust was the only outcome one could imagine. Spellcasting materials. This 9th circle spell modified by the legendary blue dragon Sirota not only increased the power of the 7th circle disjunction, but also cleverly recorded the technique of spellcasting without materials. The mage only needed to follow the steps in the spellcasting instructions, spend some time and energy, and memorize this spell more precisely. In battle, the mage would be able to exert the power of the spell through words alone. Some masters with the silent spellcasting technique could even instantly activate such a powerful spell with a single thought, turning the target into dust. Abnormal condition. Seems to be affected by the structure of the corpus callosum in the brain, similar to that of dolphin-like creatures. As a spellcaster, you naturally do not need to hibernate to memorize spells. As long as your mental strength can communicate with the source of mystery, the power of the spell will always be at your disposal. Memorize while casting the spell. Note, this seems to be a new type of magical technique. You need to carefully study and develop more functions. The corpus callosum of dolphin-like creatures. Keyes' attention was drawn to the abnormality while he was combing through his thoughts. This was probably what was mentioned in Votman's work log. In order to defeat our terrifying opponent, we've come up with many plans to prepare for war. Among them, there are adaptive modifications to some naturally advanced creatures. His own egg was brought back from the depths of the ruins by Sirota. His own dragon egg might have undergone a bloodline modification known as adaptive modifications in ancient times, resulting in some unknown evolution. However, I only discovered the phenomenon of adaptive changes when I learned more advanced spells. Could it be that this autonomous evolution has yet to be finalized after birth and is still passively evolving? Keyes had all sorts of guesses, but he lacked crucial evidence. I have to start investigating the hidden secrets of the ancient ruins civilization immediately. Otherwise, this uncontrollable situation could cost me my life one day. Keyes thought of the genetic experiments similar to bloodline modification before he transmigrated. Most of the modified experimental subjects died from genetic breakdown. It was an extremely tragic way to die. Just as Keyes discovered the problem and was about to start solving it, Sirota's summons interrupted his plans. A loud dragon's roar reverberated throughout the dragon lair. Dragon's Roar was a high-level application of dragon language. Keyes could only set aside the problem he discovered when he heard his name in the roar. He walked out of his lair and hurried towards the gathering point of the legendary Megalosaurus. When he arrived at the huge square below the Dragonheart Hall, Keyes discovered that the legendary Megalosaurus Sirota had already summoned all of the adult dragons and a small number of juvenile dragons, as well as his extraordinary young dragon. Including Sirota himself, there were a total of 26 huge Megalosaurus present. Fortunately, the square was paved with gravel and mortar, so these behemoths did not have to rub shoulders with one another. Keyes discovered that Sirota had not only summoned the Megalosaurus, but many other dragonkin tribes were also gradually gathering in the square. It was just that they could not arrive as quickly as the Megalosaurus that could fly. Keyes could tell these little creatures apart from the simple flags and unique tribal tattoos they carried. Could it be that a war is about to break out? Looking at the desert kobolds, sand lizardmen, and some draconic vipers that arrived one after another, Keyes discovered that these dragonkin were all young warriors of the tribe. None of them were old or weak. The chanting time required was shorter, the range of the portal was larger, and it was more stable. However, the magic power required was 3 times more. On the square, as the legendary Megalosaurus chanted, a huge stone door slowly rose. The granite door, which was completely formed by magic, rose to a point where an adult Megalosaurus could easily pass through. Then it stopped rising and growing. The whirlpool-like blue magic energy in the middle of the stone door emitted an astonishing magic wave. A vague, solemn, magnificent, and incomparably evil aura came from the other side of the door. Hiss! Keyes inhaled a breath of cold air. The old dragon really hid his strength well. Keyes had carefully studied this spell in order to figure out the reason for his transmigration. He knew very well how much magic power was needed to support the cross-realm teleportation of such a large-scale army. If the human spellcasters of this world used magic similar to that of Adas, I'm afraid they would need the life force of at least 10,000 slaves as equivalent magic power to build this portal. Keyes was secretly shocked by the old dragon's hidden strength. In fact, he still had some misconceptions. Of course, Sirota's ability to use the source of mystery to cast spells was very powerful, and this spell did indeed require a large amount of magic power to support it. However, it was far less amazing than Keyes had estimated. The reason was very simple. This portal was connected to the 9 prisons of Bader. As the saying went, it's easy to be bad, but difficult to be good. It was far easier to fall into hell than to rise to heaven. In terms of inclusiveness, even the most generous divine kingdom was not as inclusive as the 9 prisons of Bader or the bottomless abyss. Whether it was a saint who did good all his life or a criminal who was full of evil, as long as the seed of depravity was planted in his heart, he could easily find a place for himself in the lower realm. Mortal creatures had to pay a price to go to Bader from the material plane where they lived, but the price was much less than climbing out of the 9 prisons. Bader, this was hell, a place where compassion withered and resentment flourished. This was the home of the devil. Avernus, the first level of Bader, the eternal frontline of the eternal blood war. When Keyes first set foot on this legendary land, although he still had many fears about the future, he still felt some excitement in his heart. Walking out of the portal, the young blue dragon did not feel any dizziness or discomfort due to his excellent physique. Looking up, he could see an endless wasteland of blood-red gravel as far as the eye could see. Occasionally, there were a few hills or ravines dotting this land. The elemental concentration in the air of Bader was much higher than in the material plane, so it was relatively easy to cast spells here. In fact, in Avernus, even the beasts that wandered the wasteland and lacked intelligence had some spell-like abilities. Apart from the higher elemental concentration, this plane also had a strong law of order. As natural creatures of the evil alignment of order, the blue dragon felt that their strength had increased somewhat here. However, Sarota still restrained his own race and had the blue dragon cast a protective flame barrier. After all, the army he brought with him was not like the Megalosaurus, who could ignore the exploding fireballs falling from the sky from time to time. Although most of the tribal warriors would be cannon fodder in the blood war in the future, they still had to contribute their strength to the blue dragon lord on the battlefield. Waiting for the army to walk out of the portal one after another, some of the lower realm beasts that wandered the wastelands of Bader spied on the army that carried the aura of the prime material plane. This was due to the greedy and bloodthirsty nature of the hell creatures. However, due to the fact that there were too many powerful dragons in the group, these beasts did not have the courage to take action even though they had the desire to hunt. Sarota had already used his secret imprint to complete the execution of the bloodline contract. As soon as he arrived in Avernus, some of the servants in the army of the Dragon Queen who were responsible for confirming the recruitment of soldiers were informed of his arrival. In less than an hourglass, a dragonborn hero loyal to the evil dragon god came to receive Sarota and his army. Although there were many devils in the army of the Dragon Queen, it was still easier for Tiamat to entrust creatures with dragon bloodlines with important tasks. Good thing it's not those disgusting creatures that blaspheme the bloodline of the Megalosaurus. The legendary blue dragon was rather pleased that it was a powerful dragonkin weapon master of the Ironheart faction who received it instead of a new descendant of the evil dragons. It even turned into half-dragon form as a sign of respect and began to converse with the emissary. I am Sarota, following the war summons of the great Dragon Queen, and have come to Avernus to perform the service stipulated in the contract. Welcome, powerful legendary Megalosaurus, to this land. I am the receptionist of the Evil Dragon Council under the command of the great Dragon Queen, Murano Chowphone. Please follow me to the Evil Dragon Court of the Skull Pillar. After paying respects to Her Highness Tiamat, you and your troops will be properly settled. As you wish. After the greetings, Sarota led the army of the Dragon Nest tribe and followed the Chowphone dragonborn warrior named Murano, embarking on the journey to the Skull Pillar. Along the way, there were occasionally powerful hell beasts that wanted to ambush the army. Before Sarota could do anything, Murano, who led the army, waved his double-headed spear and easily dealt with these troubles. This kind of combat technique that's close to magic is probably the special ability of the Ironheart warrior known as the Weapon Master. Keyes, who saw the powerful dragonborn warrior on the way, thought to himself, maybe I should learn the combat techniques of different fighting schools. When I transform into my human form, I rely too much on the strength of dragons. But if I can't hit my opponent, then no matter how strong I am, it's useless. Long before coming to Avernus, Sarota had instructed his people to transform into their humanoid forms as much as possible in battle. If they really couldn't win, then they could transform into the true form of the Megalosaurus. After all, the huge size of the Megalosaurus would attract too much attention in a bloody battle, and it would be easy to be targeted by the demon army. Keyes had made up his mind to keep this in mind in this dangerous war. As long as he could stay alive for 2 years, he could leave Avernus according to the contract and return to the material plane. Since the blue dragon had to cast a fire protection barrier on the Dragon Nest tribe, they had to follow the army on the ground slowly. After walking for almost a day, a huge city wall appeared in front of them. Looking at it from afar, they could not even see the corner of the wall. Outside the city wall, there were many scaffolding made of various materials and countless soul shells with blood-red bodies. This was the initial fate of the villains who fell into Bador. There were also many lesser demons, who were constantly repairing the huge city wall under the whips of higher-level imps or barbed demon overseers. From time to time, some of the scaffolding that was not up to standard would collapse, causing a group of laborers to wail and fall into the burning moat below the city wall. This is the Bronze Citadel. Now we are building the 13th city wall. The lord of this term, Bardi, the dragonborn warrior, stopped himself from slandering the lord of the first layer of Avernus, but he still showed a look of disdain. The stronger demons in the abyss can teleport infinitely over short distances every day. Without the dimensional anchor spell, no matter how big the city wall is, it won't be able to stop those disgusting demons. The demons of Barthas like to do such useless work. This race is definitely a bureaucratic race. Fortunately, Lord Astamores of the Nine Hells invited the great Dragon Queen to be the commander of this battle. As a guide, it was his responsibility to briefly explain the situation of Bator and the Blood Station to the army recruited by the Dragon Queen. As the army continued to move forward, the Skull Pillar finally entered the sight of the Dragon Nest tribe. Ironheart. Although it was not stated in the early settings of D&D, it was still assumed that the most powerful class was the Mage class. There is even a saying that legends have no rights if they can't cast spells. In order to balance things out, the monks and warriors in the later stages of the game had some schools that were similar to spells. The warrior class introduced 9 fighting schools: White Raven, Iron Heart, Pious Heart, Steel Spirit, Desert Wind, Stone Dragon, Tiger Claw, Twilight, and Shadow Hand. Among them, Iron Heart belonged to the school of weapon masters, who preferred to control their own weapons and bodies. Note, in the original setting of D&D, Bador only had a weak tendency towards order. The strong tendency towards order in this chapter was fabricated. My thoughts are: 1. The Barthas tribe used the souls of sinners to improve their power and transform Bator for so many years. As their nest, there should be some racial bonuses. 2. The main character is still in a relatively weak stage. Maybe a slight bonus could bring some strength. 3. In order to outline the plot, there will be further discussions in this area. So I changed the setting. Please don't mind it too much. Chapter 27. The Pillar of Skulls. A gigantic skull that symbolized the evil spoils of war stood quietly in the gravel wasteland of Avernus, the first level of Bator. There is a huge hole at the bottom of this epic creation. The lair of the Penishade dragon god Tiamat was built here. This was the location of the evil dragon court that all Penishade Megalosaurus knew about. Following the dragonborn warrior, the army of the dragon lair tribe walked into the huge military camp that was preparing for war outside the evil dragon court. The scale of this military camp was far beyond the imagination of any material plane army leader. The legendary Megalosaurus Sirota led the tribe army into the military camp. It was like a drop of water flowing into a river. It did not cause any ripples. Your Excellency, Sirota, according to the orders of the Evil Dragon Council, you have arrived at the designated meeting point. As a legendary Megalosaurus, you have the right to go to the Imperial Court alone to meet the great Dragon Queen and listen to her teachings. Then what about my tribe now? There is less than a month until the enemy force of this battle, the 489th level of the Abyss, converges in Avernus. Your matured kin will need to lead your tribe warriors and wait with the army gathered by the Imperial Court. After the battle begins, you will lead them to participate in the main battle. The Dragonborn warrior explained seriously according to his duty. As for the young dragons who have yet to reach adulthood, they will be separated. They will lead their own troops or join some Bador mercenary camps. They will first adapt to this battle in some low-intensity battlefields. Well arranged. Praise the benevolent Dragon Queen. A high-level magic shield shining with magical light appeared in Sirota's hand. This was the spoils of war he got from fighting a team of adventurers when he was young. He passed it to the dragonborn warrior, whose eyes lit up. I shall pay my respects to the great evil dragon god. Please accept my gift, and please take care of my young descendants. The legendary Megalosaurus pointed its claw at several blue dragons that had yet to reach adulthood, including Keys. Although the Dragon Queen is benevolent, it is still too dangerous for young dragons who have yet to see the big picture to participate in this expedition. Bribery was one of the basic communication methods in Bator. This method played a very important role in the path of promotion for the demons in Barthas. There was even a school called the Political Academy of the 9 Levels of Hell that provided education services for young demons who wanted to learn all kinds of methods to seize power. The dragon descendant named Murano Chao Feng kindly accepted the gift of a legend-ranked blue dragon. After verifying the letter of appointment and the transfer order, the acting commander of the chained demon, Kuzu, seemed to have changed his expression. He no longer cared about the 2 dead barbed demon guards lying on the ground, as if it was another creature that had roared loudly just now. In order to please the new supervisor, he even flattered him in the common human language of the material plane, which he was not very familiar with. Obviously, his wisdom and power could not see through Keys' true form. Mr. Keys, I'm very happy about your arrival. The supervisor system is the embodiment of good order in the 9 Hells. This is definitely a good idea that only the big shots of the upper class could come up with. The chained demon, Kuzu, carefully flattered him while secretly picking up the chain that he had just pulled out of his body. The chain of a chained demon was also a part of their body. Not only was it a weapon that they could use like an arm, but it also had the ability to regenerate like a demon's body. A broken chain could be reconnected and could be used again. Following the chained demon into the camp, Keys knew why the chained demon flattered him so much. For the demon's class status was equivalent to power. In order to get rid of the word acting hanging above his head and become the real commander of this camp in the legal sense, Keys, as the supervisor, had to give a fairly positive evaluation in the report after the war. As a mercenary camp from another plane, Keys only found about 100 barbed demons as standing guards to maintain order in the camp. An army of this scale was not weak in the material plane. According to Keys' estimation, each barbed demon had the power to defeat 3 or 4 of the Desert Elf Supreme warriors that he had met not long ago. But if the battlefield was a bloody one, such an army would not have the slightest deterrence. Perhaps there was no need for the higher demons. A few stronger intermediate demons could slaughter these barbed demons. Seeing Keys' slightly frown, the chained demon hurriedly said, "Don't worry, Sir Supervisor. This is a relatively remote war zone, and it will be relatively safe after the bloody battle begins. Also, from now until the war begins, there will be mercenaries from other planes stationed in this camp according to the orders. When the time comes, the barracks here will be filled with all kinds of soldiers. Under my command, and of course under your careful evaluation and wise advice, those who work for the will of Bator will become qualified cannon fodder." When the chained demon mentioned Bator and the bloody battle, even his eyes that were wrapped in chains showed a proud look. Indeed, in terms of the potential of war, Bator only had 9 levels, and no one could figure out how many levels there were in the abyss. But even with such a huge difference in the potential of war, the demons still had a certain advantage in this war that had lasted
Chapter
for
29.
hundreds of thousands of
Through
years.
this patrol,
The most
Keys had
obvious
grasped some
example
basic
was that of
information about the
Vernus.
camp.
As the
At
bridgehead
present,
of the
there were
bloody
only
battle
a
of
few
Bator
mercenaries
had
from the
never
other
been
plane in
occupied
camp.
by the demons.
They gathered together
the skull
like a
pillars
group of
made of
thugs
demon
who had been
skulls
tricked into
still
coming to
stood
Bator
tall,
to
and
look
the demons
for
had successfully
opportunities for an
occupied
unknown
some
plane.
planes of the abyss
In addition
more
to
than
the
once.
barbed demon guards,
Pulling these
there
planes
was
from
also a
chaos into
hellhound
the camp of
raised
order.
by a chained
If
demon
not for the
in charge of
terrifying will of
patrolling
the
the
abyss,
campsite.
some
In
powerful
addition,
demon
there were
princes
thousands
and
of
demon
bloated
lords
demon
would have
cannon
personally
fodder
taken
in
part in the bloody
captivity
battle
in the corner of
and
the
the demons
campsite.
would have suffered
They were a type
even
of
greater
demon
setbacks
that was punished
in the bloody
and
battle.
tortured until
In
they
terms of
became
the strength
blind,
of the army,
deaf,
Although
and
the
stupid
demons were
because
powerful,
of their mistakes.
they were chaotic.
The other Batsu,
if not for the
habitually
control
called them
spells,
lowly demons.
even demon lords
All of the
would
above
not be able
mentioned
to
were
fully
all the
control their
forces in the
armies.
camp.
Vader's
that could be
army
put
had
into battle
strict
at
division
present,
of labor
other than
the
the
chain
strict
demon
discipline.
commander and
Even though they were equally
although the
evil
chain demon
and
had
loved to
repeatedly
use
promised that the
schemes
camp
to
would be
fight
filled
among
with
themselves
mercenaries from
under
other
the rules
planes
of
before
order,
the bloodshed
the entire
began,
Bartholomew's
and the
9
overall
hells was
strength
like
of
a
the camp
seamless
would be
war
greatly
machine.
improved.
Everything was
But how could
running
the
for the
demon's
ultimate
be
goal
trusted?
of achieving
Walking
victory
to the well-prepared
in a
resting
resting
area.
In terms of
Key's
the ability
immediately
to mobilize
dismissed
war,
the barbed
although
demon
the
guards
Abyss
that
had
the chain
countless
demon
levels
had arranged to
and could
serve as his
mobilize a
army
despairing
supervisor.
number of
He then called the three
demons,
ogre
the
brothers
cunning
into
and
his tent.
scheming upper-class
The tent was
demons
not
had
tall
attracted
enough,
supporters
and
from
the
all
ogres did
corners
not
of the
know how to
multiverse
shape
for
shift,
Bator,
so they could only sit cross-legged on the ground
and trade.
Fortunately,
in every bloody
the tent
battle,
was big enough
there would be
that
an
it was
equally
not
shocking
crowded
number
when
of
the three
mercenaries
ogres
from
sat
other
together.
planes
Seeing that they
joining
were
the demons'
seated,
camp.
Key's
Fighting
casting
for the
an
9
anti-detection
prisons of
spell
Vader.
to ensure
You have to trust
that
my
no one
judgment
was
on this
eavesdropping.
point. Even the
After
lying
that, he also
Batsu
sat
devil will give
cross-legged
an
on the
honest
ground.
answer on which
Although we
side's
have not
army
known
is
each other for
better
long,
in the bloody
I
battle.
believe that you are
The
trustworthy
chain demon's
enough.
arm wrapped
Key's
around the
paused for a
chains
moment
slapped
to
his
organize
chest,
his words,
and the chains
in fact,
clanged against
you
each
may
other.
have more or less
Keys
heard
could
about
not
the
refute the
cruelty
chain demon's
of the
words
upcoming war.
based on the pride
To
of
be
his
honest,
race.
if the dragon
What he
nest
said
was
not
indeed
bound by
part
the
of the
contract.
truth, I would
After
not want to be
inspecting the
involved in this
entire
war at
camp,
all.
he found
On
that
this
although
point,
it was
I want to hide it,
simple and
although it may
crude,
be a little
some
cowardly
basic
and
facilities and
dishonorable.
supplies,
Looking
including
around
a
at the
workshop
three
for
ogre
forging
brothers
weapons,
who were quietly
food,
listening to
and
him,
drinking water
Keyes
for the
continued.
mercenaries from other
I
dimensions.
hope that I can hold on
were
for 2
already in
years
place.
until I can
Although it
freely
was
withdraw
inevitable
from
that
the
there were
war
signs
and
of
return to my
embezzlement,
original world
it could still be
alive.
said that they
Of
were
course,
well
this
prepared.
requires some luck. However, I believe that the best way to achieve this goal is to work hard to obtain more information, learn faster to improve my strength, and find some trustworthy companions. He stretched out his clenched fist. This was a gesture that the gladiators in the Ash world used to bless each other before a life-and-death battle. I hope I can get this honor. Let's help each other. If the enemy dies, I will live. Fight to the end. The 479th level of the bottomless abyss was called Acid Fog Canyon by the Thanner Re-Demons. The atmosphere here was an acidic mist that was constantly being replenished by the volcanic eruptions. The volcanic eruptions left behind a scene of utter destruction. A huge, winding canyon cut through the vast land of this plain. Originally, this level was ruled by a Baelor lord named Tardheim, but later his position as a demon lord was overthrown by another powerful demon. The reason he was subverted was because he tried to grasp power that was far beyond his reach. As an evil demon, it was in their nature to seek greater power. There was nothing wrong with it. However, in order to seize power, Tardheim boldly and recklessly used the remains of the Obilus demon lord that he had found in an unknown era and carried out a crazy fusion experiment with the weak abyssal worms that had all the genetic information of the Thanner Re-Demons. The purpose of the experiment was to create a brand new creature with the characteristics of two demons. If Tardheim succeeded, then he would become a powerful demon lord with the strength of the demon creator, and even have the opportunity to seek the supreme honor of the demons, the title of Demon Prince. For the sake of this grand goal, the flame demon Lord Baelor had spent almost all of his wealth. In order to focus on the experiment, he even gave up a demon order that he had set up for countless years in the material plane. No matter where, even in the abyss, as long as he persevered, he would always gain something. This difficult experiment that lasted hundreds of years finally succeeded, but it was only the experiment itself that succeeded. Tardheim had suffered the biggest failure since his birth. No one knew the exact reason for the failure, but the most widespread theory was that Tardheim was careless and chose the wrong experimental material. An evil spellcaster with the memories of his previous life fell into the abyss and became an abyssal worm. After successfully combining with the remains of the Obilus demon lord, he became a brand new demon. It was undeniable that the design of this experiment was ingenious, and the results were very satisfactory. This experimental creation that Tardheim had high hopes for was powerful enough and had a certain amount of wisdom. However, perhaps it was a little too powerful. This brand new demon had enough strength to rival its creator as soon as it appeared. All the means that Tardheim had carefully prepared to enslave the experimental creation failed. The gigantic worm defeated and devoured its creator, and built its own lair above the castle that once belonged to the demon lord. The demonic creation became the new demon lord of the 479th abyssal level at an unimaginable speed. The title of Worm Tyrant was quickly learned by other demons in the abyss. As the material to synthesize this beast, the predecessor of the abyssal worm, the evil spellcaster might have just been a lousy mage when he was alive. But after experiencing Tardheim's experiment, if he could still be called himself, had a powerful strength that he could never hope to achieve when he was alive when the experiment was successful. The Worm Tyrant had tough muscles similar to the Obilus demon, and these muscles formed its huge body that stretched like a mountain ridge. This body not only contained powerful physical strength that would shock any demon, but also stored amazing magic power in every part of the body, allowing this behemoth to rely on its own instincts to cast spells like a sorcerer. The concept of spell slots that restricted the continuous destructive power of a spellcaster was meaningless to such an existence. There was no need for any preparation. As long as the Worm Tyrant was willing, the frenzied flood of spells could easily tear apart any creature that dared to face it. This new demon lord quickly adapted to its new life as a demon, and gradually adapted to the laws of the abyss according to the path of a demon's development. Perhaps it was the legacy of its birth experiment, but this beast with some intelligence easily completed what its creator had spent hundreds of years to complete, creating a new demon race. Of course, this creation was not like the ambitious Tardheim who wanted to create a new species out of thin air. The Worm Tyrant's creation was simple and crude, but more efficient. It used its own flesh and blood to easily reproduce acid mist worms that covered the entire floor. The size of these first worms was far from comparable to their creator, and they could only grow to a few feet long. But these little things had amazing vitality. The acid mist worms relied on the acid mist that covered the entire floor to survive. By breathing in the sulfur-rich acid gas, and then excreting the gas that was suitable for other creatures to breathe after digestion, the shocking number of worms even changed the environment of the entire floor. Even though the underground volcanoes were constantly spewing out new acidic gas, the acidic mist still shrouded the entire plain. However, the concentrated acid flowing in the rivers had been greatly diluted, and some resilient plants had begun to cover the barren land. These changes made this floor begin to become livable. Many various Tana, Re, and other creatures migrated from other floors of the abyss to the transformed 479th floor of the abyss, the original acid mist canyon. Originally, it was impossible for the weak Tana, Re demons to enjoy the fat abyssal worms endlessly like the higher demons, but the Tana Re who migrated to this floor found a substitute food that tasted very similar to the abyssal worms, the acid mist worms. This discovery made them ecstatic, so more demons began to try to sneak into this place that was like a paradise to them. However, the roles of the prey and the hunter would sometimes change. The tyrant worm used its own flesh and blood to create a new demon race that covered the entire floor. It was not intended to be a free meal for other Tana Re. As more and more Tana Re species appeared on this floor, demons gradually began to become food for the worms, and the two levels of the food chain were quickly reversed. It was then that the stowaways realized that the acid mist canyon was not a free meal, but a huge trap. As the fresh Tana Re demons were preyed on and devoured by the acid mist worms, these new Tana Re demons with certain demon worm characteristics began to self-evolve. In the end, two evolved forms were stably inherited: the sky-burning walker and the cataclysmic worm. The sky-burning walker was a kind of huge acid mist worm. The largest size could grow to be comparable to an adult megalosaurus. It had a structure similar to an air sac in its body that could breathe in air and adjust the density of its body to achieve flight. It could also spray compressed gas around through the large and small pores on its body to change direction and move at high speed. The gas that the sky-burning walker sprayed out was extremely hot and flammable. It would form a layer of flame shield around its body that was always burning. Usually, they looked like they were floating in the air, like a boat on fire floating on the sea. Once they found their prey, they would pounce on it like a rocket. The target that they targeted would not only have to face a fierce collision comparable to a siege hammer, but also suffer the double torture of strong acid and flames. The evolutionary path of the cataclysmic worm was the opposite of the sky-burning walker. It abandoned the evolutionary path of individual strength. By giving up the individual, the worms formed a strange, aggregated creature. Its body was made up of thousands of worms, and it did not have a fixed form. It was constantly dripping strong acid. The breeding of the cataclysmic worm was somewhat accidental. At first, only a small number of acid mist worms stubbornly parasitized the bodies of some tannery. They consumed the host body to survive and reproduce. This behavior of damaging the host body would cause the host to gradually weaken, making it easier for other acid mist worms to capture and parasitize. If the host was strong enough, it was possible that they would only be corrupted by the worms instead of being completely digested. The corrupted would condense into the body invaded by the worms and assemble into a new cataclysmic worm. Every cataclysmic worm that was born could randomly retain some of the host's abilities when they were alive. Every sky-burning walker and the cataclysmic worm was the favored offspring of the tyrant worm. They were the demon lord's most trusted kin and the creatures at the top of the food chain in the acid mist canyon. The other Tana demons could only carefully survive under the rule of the two species in this terrifying dimension that was originally thought to be a cafeteria, but was eventually proven to be a kitchen. In fact, unless the Tana who came to this dimension willingly or involuntarily became parasitized by the worms, they would immediately be devoured by the swarm of worms. The ancient will of the abyss, which had the greatest tolerance for chaos and evil, accepted these two new higher demons. In a sense, they had indeed strengthened the power of the abyss. And the tyrant worm, who had created these two powerful demons, was naturally rewarded by the abyss. Although the will of the abyss did not give it more power, it gave it another ability that it lacked, the ability to think. Ordinary demons did not need to think. The only thing they needed to worry about was how to survive in the abyss. But it was different for demon lords. These powerful demons not only had to face the covetous eyes of the lower demons under their rule, but also various malicious schemes from other demon lords in the abyss. Being able to think, being able to find loopholes, and being able to formulate more evil schemes was a compulsory course for a qualified demon lord. Before it had the wisdom to think, the tyrant worm was like a beast that had just awakened its intelligence. It fought with its instincts, created its kin with its instincts, and controlled powerful magic with its instincts. Its power was undeniable, but this power was too singular and too narrow to deal with more and more complex challenges. But everything was different after it gained the ability to think. First of all, it was not satisfied that it could only cast spells like a sorcerer. The primitive and rough magic power could not exert its full strength. After careful consideration, it came up with a solution to this problem. The tyrant worm had recruited many creatures with exquisite spell-casting skills to its kingdom through deceit, bluffing, and other means. It humbly asked these teachers for knowledge that could improve its spell-casting ability using the mind language. In order to obtain precious knowledge, the tyrant worm became extremely generous. It almost agreed to these powerful spellcasters' requests. It regarded them as an investment. Investment required a return, and the demon lord's investment was an excess return. After the tyrant worm had obtained enough knowledge, and even went further than all of its teachers on the path of magic, this greedy worm did not hesitate to take back its previous investment. Just like how it treated Tardheim, who created it, it ruthlessly devoured the spellcasters that it had previously treated as its guests. Among them were human archmages, fairy kings, and some other demons. But among them, the ones that brought it the most benefits were all kinds of evil dragons that were born as powerful magic creatures. Because it had devoured too many megalosaurus, its powerful body even evolved again. Its circular body grew scales on the surface of its body, and the originally sticky and fat tongue in its huge mouth full of barbed teeth twisted, growing a huge dragon head and many appendages. It named it Dragon Subbody. Relying on the dragon's subbody, the tyrant worm had the ability to communicate, which made it easier for it to convey more and more complex evil plans. With the dragon subbody, it could use some spells that originally required language and special gestures without hindrance. The tyrant worm was very happy to see this change. It even gave the dragon subbody a unique name. In honor of the tyrant worm's creator, it named it Hemtar. P.S. Spell slot. This is a special setting of the game. Unlike many other games where the mage profession has a mana bar, the number of spells a mage can cast is strictly limited. Every day, they need to rely on 8 hours of sleep to recollect the spells they will use the next day. Only a small number of particularly strong or special existences can be exempted from this rule. This setting is, firstly, to balance the mage and other classes. Secondly, it is convenient for players to calculate damage when running a team. After all, the human brain is not a computer. The specific rules are more complicated. There are some differences in each version, so I won't introduce it. Those who are interested can search for it yourself. It is quite interesting. Chapter 30. Chain Demon's Guarantee was confirmed, and in a way, it proved that the Demon's Guarantee was still valid. On the second day after Keys and the rest settled into the mercenary camp, there were more soldiers and military supplies being escorted by the demon army. However, there weren't many who could be called warriors. Fortunately, this was mainly a mercenary camp. It wasn't like the other small Batsu camps, where groups of disgusting imps with constantly melting human forms were arranged into groups. There's not a single one who can fight. Neru the ogre walked into Keys's tent and sat cross-legged on the ground. He began to grumble. The newcomers are just a bunch of punks who don't know their own strength. They're still clamoring for the demons to see their powerful martial arts. Ha! His brother, the ogre voodoo doctor, handed him a freshly made energy ointment. The ointment had the miraculous effect of calming the temper of otherworldly creatures in Batsu. Neru, you have to learn to control your anger. Only when your anger explodes in battle can you hurt the enemy and not your own people. The new soldiers aren't that great, but the new weapons are still promising. Brew, who had gone to check the new military supplies with Keys, opened the tent. He was holding some samples in his hands and under his arms. The reason he opened the tent was to allow Quess, who was dragging more wooden boxes, to enter the tent smoothly. Phew! The blue dragon, who was in his youth form, seemed to be gasping for breath. It was a little strenuous for him to drag the heavy boxes. When Keys entered the tent, Brew put down the curtain and hurriedly threw the things he was responsible for to the ground. The muffled sound and the marks on the ground showed that the ogre was not slacking off. The items he brought were also very heavy. What kind of weapons are these? They look like battering rams. But even if they're made of bronze, they're a little small. Neru was obsessed with all kinds of weapons. When he heard that they were new weapons, he could not help but want to study them. He curiously picked up the new weapons that Brew had thrown to the ground. He thought it was some kind of bronze battering ram, but the cylinder was hollow in the middle. These are copper cannons. Keys did not use the name Infernal Roar given to him by the demonic quartermaster who gave him the weapons. Instead, he used a more concise and direct way to call them. These are the ordnance prepared by the demons to deal with the charge of the demon minions. Seeing that Nalu was about to wave the copper cannon in his hand, Quest directly opened the lid of a few wooden boxes that he had dragged over, revealing some neatly stacked cannonballs that were buffered by hay. Bronze cannons can't be used by waving them around. They have to rely on the explosion of gunpowder to fire the cannonballs. Only then can they cause damage. Brew stopped his brother, who was about to tear down the tent, and explained, Key said that this thing is good stuff. If it's used properly, the power of each shell fired will be similar to my bursting fireball. In fact, the demons had invented this weapon because of its explosive fire damage. Most of the demons in the Abyss Tower were almost immune to electric shock and poison damage. Fire, strong acid, and cold could effectively kill the weaker low-level demons. In Avernus, the main raw materials of gunpowder were sulfur and saltpeter, and the production cost was extremely low. Most of the bats of devil were not afraid of fire damage, so this type of cannon was widely used in the front line of the blood station. The demons used this type of cannon very conveniently. They only needed 2 ordinary barbed demons. One was responsible for shouldering and aiming, while the other assisted in changing the ammunition and firing. As long as the demons did not charge in front of them, the copper cannons could continuously fire and inflict heavy damage to the enemy's minions. As for the damage caused by the overheating of the barrel and the explosion of the barrel, it was just a number on the battle damage report. No Batsu commander was particularly concerned. After continuously firing 20 shells, on average, 1 shot every 30 breaths, the barrel of the copper cannon will overheat and need to be cooled down. Seeing such a familiar killing weapon, Quest was naturally not prepared to use it casually like the demons. He completely relied on numbers to annihilate the enemy. Of course, the dozens of copper cannons in the camp could not form a large-scale attack in a bloody battle like this. Whether it was out of the nature of his race or out of memory of the world in his memory, Keyes was prepared to experiment with this type of weapon to find a more effective way of attacking. I don't think we can use the coordination of infantry and cannons. The soldiers in this camp definitely don't have that kind of military literacy. This caliber of cannon is fine against the minions, but against the greater demons who can teleport, I'm afraid it's useless. I have to think of a way to focus fire when they're not paying attention. As Keyes pondered these questions, he wrote down some of the parameters and problems he had just tested on a piece of paper made from the skin of an unknown creature. Weapon name: Copper Cannon, Purgatory Roar. Parameter description: this is a long-range attack weapon that can fire explosive shells as a means of damage. It can be fired at a 45-degree angle and can fire at a maximum range. The furthest attack range is about 4,000 feet, 1,300 meters. It can take 3 to 4 rounds of effective fire from the enemy. It requires the cooperation of infantry to resist the impact in order to achieve continuous firepower. Each cannon can fire 10 times in a row and needs to cool down. Damage description: the shell can cause both kinetic and fire damage to the enemy. Under Neru's strong request, Keyes wrote down some of the weapon's parameters in the way he was used to. After seeing this new weapon, the ogre blacksmith seemed to have the idea of writing a guide to ogre weapons like his brother. Unfortunately, he did not know how to write, so he could only ask Keyes to help him record the results of the experiment. He was responsible for moving the copper cannon and ammunition from Keyes' tent to the outside of the camp in exchange for the experiment. Boss, those idiots and that kid just used the weapons the demons gave us. Those demons were reluctant to give us these things. They're not weak. Before he could finish, the gang leader waved his hand and interrupted the bandit's report and his jaw. As the gangster leader of the Broom Eyebrows bandit group, Dalton hated it when people spat on him when talking to him. Perhaps this subordinate was too excited and forgot about this, so he was slapped in the face. When the other members saw the tragic fate of their companions, they secretly reminded themselves not to make the same mistake. Seeing that his subordinates were afraid of him because of his tyranny, Broom Eyebrows Dalton was very satisfied. Seems like it's better to be a little more ruthless. Since these bastards came here, they seem to have forgotten their King etiquette. Dalton habitually raised his broom eyebrows. Dalton had always been good at these little tricks to control villains. These tricks could be said to be the capital that made him rich. Ever since he obtained the capital that allowed him to prosper from the demon-like merchant who was perhaps a demon in disguise, Dalton's path in the underworld of Soft Maple City had never been smoother. Bandit gangs came to him one after another, and even the nobles in the city had to show him respect. This good life lasted until the merchant who gave Dalton the capital came to ask for a return. Originally, he wanted to do what he did countless times: use boundless promises in exchange for other people's precious wealth. When the victims came to their senses and came to ask for payment, he would tear up the agreement and beat them up or throw them directly into the sewers to feed the rats. However, Dalton miscalculated. He only showed a slight sign of wanting to break the agreement in front of the demon merchant, and his skin was torn apart by the flames. After using up some magic amulets that he had accumulated over the years to buy, he was lucky enough to survive. He wanted to report this heresy to the divine priest who preached in the city. Once again, he miscalculated. Before he could finish exaggerating the horror and evilness of the demons, the priest roared, "The villains who make deals with the demons need to be completely purified." At that moment, it was as if the priests had forgotten any words related to salvation in their doctrines that they often preached. After killing the priest who roared to purify him, Dalton, who had no place in the world, had no choice but to obey the agreement and come to this damned place called Avernus to start his life in Bardo. However, due to the punishment for breaking the agreement, as soon as he walked out of the portal of Avernus, he was thrown to the mercenary recruitment office by the demon merchant. Then, he was immediately arranged to participate in the latest bloody battle. To be honest, when he first came to Bardo a few days ago, seeing all kinds of demons on the streets and avoiding the deadly fireballs that fell from the sky, Dalton and his subordinates were almost scared to death. One had to know that before they came to this damned place, in Soft Maple City, even a child knew that the most unyielding person in the city was not the city lord who only knew how to give orders, but Dalton, the boss of all the gang bosses. But in fact, if he knew what bloody battle really meant, he would not have been scared to death. "Little bastards, come with me. Let's meet the guys who got the new weapons." It was not that Dalton did not listen to the report of the unlucky man just now. In fact, it was he who ordered people to investigate Keyes and his party. This was also one of the many tricks that Dalton had mastered. Learn to weigh the weight of others before making a plan. He tidied up his open-neck shirt, which was wrapped around his body due to his sweat, and put on the iconic bowler hat of the broom eyebrows. Dalton stood up from the stone stool and stomped his feet as if he wanted to shake off the hell soil that had soaked his shoes. His rosaceous nose opened and closed slightly, and he muttered in a cunning and cruel voice, "This damned place makes my nose uncomfortable. Everywhere is uncomfortable." Keyes and the ogres, who had just finished testing the so-called Hellscream outside the mercenary camp, happened to meet the broom eyebrows who wanted to weigh their weight. Chapter 31. What are these little guys talking about? Blue, the ogre who stood beside Keyes, asked the ogre who was blocking their way. He had yet to master the spell language proficiency. Indeed, after coming to Bator, Keyes had force-fed him some infernal language, but the little guys in front of him obviously did not speak the common language of the underworld. "Stop, ogre idiots, and that country boy who came out of nowhere." The one who shouted was the big voice of the Broombrows gang. His name was Gary or Gary, but Boss Dalton needed someone with such a strong voice to convey what he wanted to say. "I heard that the demons gave you something new. Show it to the Broombrows gang." The big voice rubbed his hands as if he was about to beat someone up. "Damn it, can't you understand human language? Hey, I'm talking to you, country bumpkin." The loud voice that he was most proud of did not seem to attract the attention of the ogres. The big voice seemed to be a little angry. He raised his right hand and pointed at Keyes, who was standing behind the ogres. It seemed like he was being treated as a pushover. Although the blue dragon's body had developed quickly enough, he could still change his body shape according to his age using magic. Although he was taller and stronger than the average human teenager, he looked just like a teenager to others. Quest looked at the mercenaries who were pointing at him and yelling at him in a language he couldn't understand. He didn't even need to waste his mana to cast language proficiency on himself. Just by looking at their appearance and cowardice, he could tell that these people were some low-level villains from other planes. "Ignore them. Let's go," Keyes added in his heart. They were just cannon fodder anyway. He signaled the ogres to return to the camp. The acting commander of the chain ogre had just sent a barbed ogre guard to inform them that a group of decent mercenaries had been sent to the camp. He wanted to ask Keyes to give him some advice on how to deploy the troops. This kid really came from a remote village. He's been with the ogres for so long that he can't even understand human speech. "How dare you ignore us?" The bandits had always thought that Keyes was the human youth that the three ogres had captured to act as their interpreter or food storage. Not long ago, they had even seen him following behind an ogre, dragging a heavy box containing new weapons across half of the camp. There was never a shortage of reckless thugs in any gang of thugs. These reckless thugs always exploded completely at the beginning of their anger. They had no habit of accumulating anger, and they always lacked a grasp of the actual situation they were in. After the ogre and the blue dragon ignored Broom Eyebrows and his gang's provocation, a few of them jumped out from the group of self-proclaimed heroes. To be honest, if they were still in soft Maple City, Broombrows Dalton would have cheered for these little bastards. Their decisive moves often showed their decisiveness, striking fear into the hearts of their enemies before the battle even started. But it was different now. This was the demon's lair. Who knew if the seemingly harmless appearance was actually a demon's disguise? Dalton only wanted to weigh the weight of the only human-like creature in the camp. He reckoned that the creature had some weight to it, since it was able to survive in this godforsaken place. Only after evaluating the feasibility of the plan, if possible, would he be prepared to do what he did to the garrison captain under the soft Maple City city lord. He would use bribery, fraud, threats, and other means to put him into his bag so that he could use him at any time. This shitty place is really strange. Those little bastards who couldn't even squeeze an egg out of them have become so strong-willed in this place. Damned idiots, messing up my plan. Dalton was so angry that he almost went crazy, but he did not want his subordinates to see his weakness. He did not know what to do for a moment. The first one to attack was not Broom Eyebrows, who had been loudly provoking them at the beginning. Instead, it was an inconspicuous burglar. This burglar, who was only used to stealing in the dark, was now as fierce as a warrior. He first hid in the shadow behind Broom Eyebrows and threw his net at Keys and the others. The burglar purposely added some extra material to the net. The net, which was originally used to steal pet dogs, was now covered with sharp iron shards. After throwing the net, the burglar jumped out of the group with a butcher's knife and went straight for his target. At the same time, he was imagining the cruel scene of his knife stabbing into the ignorant country bumpkin's body wrapped in his bramble net. Don't stab at those vital spots. Maybe Broom Eyebrows still has a use for that kid, the burglar reminded himself. The other gang members could not help but cheer for the burglar for these two beautiful consecutive attacks. For a moment, including Broom Eyebrows, a few other villains with quick reactions rushed forward with machetes, axes, and other weapons in their hands. Obviously, they did not want the burglar to monopolize the glory and wanted to get a share of the loot. Noticing the other villains who wanted to steal his kill, the burglar could not help but curse in his heart. These bastards need to be taught a lesson. Keys also had the same thought. These guys, who were brought here by demons from an unknown material plane to be cannon fodder, were really ignorant and fearless. Even the Batsuit Devil, who was much stronger than them, had to follow the rules of hell and accumulate merits little by little to be promoted. Obey the orders of the superior was Batsu's iron law. No demon in the camp dared to directly attack his superior. If they wanted to die, it would be better to fight a bailer alone than to do this stupid thing. A few barbed eyebrows, who were originally standing in the distance and watching these country bumpkins argue with each other, saw that the mercenaries dared to draw their knives. They roared angrily and rushed over like clockwork. The low-level cannon fodder wanted to attack the combat staff officer in the camp. In their eyes, Keys, the combat staff officer, was also a country bumpkin from the material plane. This was simply an unforgivable act of rebellion. If their ambush had succeeded, these devil guards would have been sent to the military court for their negligence. Keys reacted faster than the barbed eyebrows. The blue dragon, who had excellent dynamic vision, dodged the net when it flew over. Without using any magic ability, Keys took out the wailing, double-barreled shotgun and jumped in front of the burglar, who was still launching a jump attack. With an imperceptible smile on his face, Keys muttered in a low voice, "If I shoot at close range, I won't be able to miss the target." With a bang, the fire and metal shrapnel almost hit the burglar's head at the same time. There was no scream because the victim's head disappeared in an instant, leaving only the twitching body that fell back under the kinetic force. The white and blood-red shrapnel burst out of the burglar's head and splashed on the other villains who wanted to snatch the head. The eyeball-sized shrapnel was stuck in Loud Voice's mouth. After he struggled to vomit for a while and coughed out the disgusting thing, he found that the shrapnel was actually the burglar's eyeball. But it was a blessing in disguise. When he vomited, he rushed much slower and fell behind one of his companions, so he dodged the second shot from the wailing. But the one who rushed in front of him was not so lucky. The shrapnel tore through the light wrought tan armor the thug wore like a piece of paper and then drilled out from his back. A large hole that almost split him in half appeared on the body of the attacker. Clean and efficient. Keyes was satisfied with his shooting this time. Imitating the cowboy's action of putting away the gun, he gently blew at the muzzle that was emitting gunpowder smoke before putting away the wailing. At this time, the barbed demon guards had already rushed over and chopped the remaining villains who dared to attack into pieces with their big knives, as if they were vegetables. In front of the 6-feet-tall Hell's minions, these brave men of Soft Maple City were as weak as children. "You bunch of filthy bastards, you actually dare to attack the battle staff officer of the camp. You are simply lawless." A captain of the barbed demon guards spat out sparks of spittle while cursing this group of villains in Inferno language. Even more barbed demons rushed over from afar and surrounded this group of people, but they did not rashly launch an attack. Chapter 32. Broom Eyebrows. What should we do? A lackey asked his boss as he gripped his weapon. Surrounded by more than a dozen barbed fiend guards, he appeared to be very nervous, his voice even trembling. Ignoring his subordinate's question, Dalton himself was also very terrified. Fight? Definitely not. Even if he used all his trump cards and encouraged his lackeys to fight for him for a while, he probably would not be able to escape from the base of these demons. Beg for mercy? The problem was that there was no language barrier, and there was no way to communicate at all. Hell, wasn't the demon merchant who forced him to come to this godforsaken place very eloquent? Why was there no one here who could speak? The demon leading the charge only knew how to roar. A dozen barbed fiend guards had suppressed more than 100 members of the gang, but they did not attack. Instead, they kept cursing with filthy, infernal words. Keyes knew very well that these guards had no intention of executing all the gang members now, as long as he, the combat staff officer of the camp in name, did not give the order. The reason why the barbed fiend guards did not hesitate to kill the gang that attacked them was because their rebellious behavior had violated the laws of hell, and they had to be severely punished. As for the remaining villains who did not have the time to act, they were the valuable assets of the camp. They would still be useful after the war broke out, even for low-tier Batsu. The barbed fiend guards were not stupid. If these mercenaries were all dead when the bloody battle broke out, the order of their appearance by their superiors would probably be pushed forward. That chain man is here. The one who spoke was the Ogre Neru. He was very interested in the chain of armor and weapons that grew from the body of the camp's acting commander, and had even given the chain fiend an interesting nickname, Chain Man. "Oh my, what's going on?" The acting commander of the chain fiend guards in the camp ran over, dragging a chain behind him as he shouted, "Who's so bold to rebel in my camp?" Running to Keyes' side, the chain fiend guard greeted Keyes warmly, asking if he was hurt. After getting negative answer, he put on a "thank goodness you're not" expression. Of course, it was fake concern. After all, this was the hell of Bator, one of the places in the multiverse where power and authority were most closely matched. As the acting commander of the camp, he was confident that he could suppress all the other Batsu in the camp with his own strength. Since the one who came out of nowhere had the right to give him a score in the post-battle report, how could he be defeated by such a weak little bug? "You bunch of brainless retards." Our combat staff officer, Mr. Keyes, was almost assassinated because of your carelessness. As long as he could win the favor of this combat staff officer, the chances of him removing the word acting and being promoted to an official commander would be higher. As long as there was a chance to climb to a higher position, the devils would not easily give it up. In order to perform better, not only did the chained demon angrily curse the incompetence of the guards under him, but he also whipped them with the chains wrapped around his body. In Bator, the subordinate demons were nothing more than numbers on the battle damage report that was being written or would be written in the future. This was not out of strictness or discipline, but a law of rearing beasts in the huge, demonic Colosseum of Bator. If the subordinate demons were not ruthlessly oppressed, their nature of coveting the throne and daring to plot any evil schemes would bring disaster. The first victim would be their own demon commander in the chain that they were loyal to. Therefore, when the chain demon punished these barbed demon guards, it had no intention of holding back its strength. It had gone through countless similar harsh punishments to get to the position of acting commander, not to mention that it had a chance to show off its management ability in front of Keys. In order to increase the punishment, spikes grew on the chains, and every whip would take away a small piece of flesh from the victim. But none of the barbed demons dared to resist or dodge the painful punishment. Anyway, the demons had a certain regenerative ability. Although the beating was painful, it would not cause death. Of course, this was only for the lower world creatures with good physique. If ordinary people were whipped by the vicious spike chains, they would have been smashed into a pile of minced meat. Hey, why are those demons fighting among themselves? Shut up, I'm not deaf. It's the ears. The minions of the Broom Eyebrows gang were secretly shocked when they saw the chained demon beating up the barbed demon guards. They wondered if they would lose an arm or a leg if they were to be whipped like that. Keys had no interest in watching the chained demon's performance. The battle was imminent. Perhaps in the next minute, multiple demons of Tana would appear in front of them through the overlapped plains. The young blue dragon was a practical child who could not wait to spend every minute and every second on preparing for the battle and improving its strength. It was all for the sake of what it had promised the three ogre brothers, to survive this bloody battle without any danger. Keys raised his hand and grabbed the wrist of the chained demon, who was waving the chain vigorously. The chained demon was obviously surprised by the strength of a human teenager like Keys. But then, the chained demon quickly hid its expression. It did not want to show such emotions in front of its subordinates. It would only make them doubt its ability and stir up more conspiracies against it. We're pressed for time. Perhaps we can let these people lead the assault team as punishment. Keys said concisely as he stared at the chained demon. The chained demon's acting commander put on a ferocious expression as if it was trying to curry favor with Hao Ren. Of course, I have to admire your quick decision. I mean, it's a good idea to let these lowlifes do the rough work. That's right. After pleasing the person who was crucial to his promotion, the chained demon immediately turned his ugly face to the few guards he had just whipped. You lowly bastards. Did you hear the chief of staff plead for you? Take these scum from the material plane away and keep an eye on them. When the camp is attacked for the first time, you'll lead the charge. If you're lucky, you might survive. Hee, you lowlifes. That was the first sentence Dalton and the others heard from the guards in the camp. After the chained demon gave the order, it then invited Keys to meet the new big shot. Only the barbed demon guards, who were casually sent to their deaths by the sinister consigliere and the harsh acting commander, were left to clean up the mess. These low-level demons, who were as ferocious as their superiors, finally made an exception and used spells that they were not very familiar with. And when they used the language proficiency spell, the casting material was the tongues of the villains from the Broombrows gang. Perhaps it was because they rarely used this spell, or purely for the purpose of venting their anger. The barbed demon even cut off the tongues of dozens of people before it could successfully speak words that the other villains could understand. Anyway, the loss of tongues did not affect the use of cannon fodder. Chapter 33. Chained Demon used Purgatory, which had a strong accent and strict vocabulary, to introduce another group of people who came to the low-intensity battlefield to gain experience and slack off. A goblin in a strange outfit, a Sawajin whose gender was unknown, and a team of semi-constructed guards led by a golem leader were the members of this gold-plated group. Staff Officer Keys, allow me to introduce you. This is Mr. Raknaz Spanner. He is a recently naturalized noble duke of the foreign goblin kingdom who admires the great Bator civilization. Based on the large number of slave resources provided by this friendly kingdom for the construction of the first level of Bator, Avernus, and the recommendation of the Bator Diplomatic and Strategic Research Center, this gentleman will be a war observer and experience the test of a bloody battle up close. Chain Demon turned his head politely and said to the war observer, Raknaz Spanner, although there is a certain amount of danger as a war observer, I believe that you will be able to overcome it and learn the essence of Bader's war civilization in battle. Through Chain Demon's lengthy introduction, Keyes had a preliminary understanding of this bloody battle observation team that was sent to Bador. What was unusual was that this team was led by a great noble from the Goblin Technological Empire, which was adjacent to the machinery realm. The entire team of well-equipped, semi-constructed guards and the mechanical warrior leading them were the personal guards and guards of the Goblin Noble. The last member of the team, the Sawajin whose gender was unknown, was an advanced sea priest who was captured by the goblins and used as a spellcaster. What an interesting combination, and I don't know what aesthetic style it is. This was Keyes' first reaction. As the leader of the party, the Goblin Noble wore a form-fitting formal robe that resembled a suit. He also wore a pair of oiled leather-pointed boots. The top of his head was shiny, and a pair of metal goggles were tied to his forehead with a belt. They looked like two small broken horns. He seemed to be able to understand the relatively obscure infernal without any hindrance. When Chain Demon introduced him to Keyes, he politely bowed slightly and placed his right hand on his chest. His other hand was holding a small folding umbrella made entirely of metal. The fireballs falling from the sky of Avernus fell on this umbrella like real rain, making a faint pop sound and then completely disappearing. Only occasionally, the runes inscribed on the metal umbrella would give off an almost undetectable flash. That little thing is dressed in an interesting way. Blue the Ogre, who was standing behind Kith, whispered to his brother in a muffled voice. He gestured with his thick fingers as if he was measuring the height of the goblin. When Alu saw this, he gently patted his belly, but still let out a chuckle. How dare you two filthy ogres mock the great Lord Riknaz? The Sawajin spellcasters beside the Goblin Noble seemed to have been angered by the ogre's frivolous actions, and they let out a scolding. Keyes recognized the voice of the Sawajin. It was a female Sawajin. As the Sawajin sea priestess scolded, she waved her hand and cast a spell-like ability unique to her race, Ghostbite. A phantom of a soul shark's head appeared behind Blue the Ogre. The shark's huge jaws suddenly closed, as if the phantom's sharp teeth had suddenly become real. Be careful! Damn it! A few different curses were mixed together. The huge shark's mouth did not bite the flesh on Blue's back. The Ogre Gourmet cast a spell just as the fangs were about to touch him. A special candy, similar to popping candy, was tossed into his mouth. In a flash, Blue's body was vaporized. The shark's sharp teeth bit the air and made a bang sound. It was very powerful. Blue's body turned into a cloud of smoke and floated backward. Although this form made him immune to physical attacks, he would suffer additional damage when he was attacked by magic. He had to retreat to a safe place and use the advantage of a spellcaster to cooperate with his brothers in battle. This was a tactic that he had practiced many times. Seeing their brothers being attacked, Neru and Puru were instantly enraged. The ogre blacksmith waved his huge ebony flail and charged forward, which Dr. Puru cooperated with Keyes, who had drawn his scimitar and was about to execute the decapitation tactic. The ogre blacksmith waved his troll skull staff, and an acid bullet flew close to the ground at a tricky angle towards the leader of the opposing team, Raknaz. Stop! With a furious roar, the camp's chain troll acting commander used his body to block Paru's acid bullet. He could not sit idly by and watch the battlefield observer arranged by his superiors be attacked. If the Goblin Noble was injured, the situation would be out of control. The chain troll could not bear such a huge burden. The acid bullet hit the chains wrapped around the chain troll's body. The metallic surface of the chains hissed as they were corroded. However, the rust on the surface acted as a barrier, effectively preventing further damage from the acid. As for the acid that seeped through the cracks of the chains and stuck to his skin, it could not harm the intermediate Batsa Devil, who had strong acid resistance. However, that was all the chain troll could do. He had wanted to restrain Keyes, who had drawn his scimitar, but the young blue dragon had gradually adapted to his human form and had nimbly dodged the chain's interference. The chain troll only wanted to take control of the situation. Just as the chain troll was about to add a few more chains to complete its goal, the ogre Neru's charge interrupted its actions. The heavily armored ogre warrior was twice its height and 4 times its weight. The chain troll staggered from the impact. If it weren't for the heavy chains wrapped around its body, the impact would have sent it flying. The chain troll's violent nature was stirred up by the impact. The cunning creature had no intention of continuing to fight to the death with Keys, who it could not see through, and Neru, whose physique was far superior to that of an ordinary ogre. It chose to avoid the enemy's main force and strike at the enemy's weak points, treating Paru as its opponent. It seemed like the ogre liked to attack with acid, and it was difficult for acid to hurt it. As for the observer, the chain troll believed that as long as it captured the slightly skinny ogre voodoo doctor in front of it, these people would not kill the goblin so easily. The chain troll was quick to come up with a plan, but it had overlooked 2 problems. First, did the ogre voodoo doctor really only have acid attacks? The answer was no. Seeing the chain troll charge at him, Paru revealed a triumphant smile. He waved the troll's skull, and a large yellow fog enveloped the chain troll. When the chain troll charged out of the fog and carefully checked for any signs of poisoning or other negative effects, it realized that the yellow fog was a powerful adhesive. It was a voodoo spell the ogre voodoo doctor had invented himself, aerosol. The chains that had been as easy as waving an arm were now stuck together. The protective armor had become a large metal cocoon that trapped the chain troll. Additionally, the chain troll did not expect the combined attacks of the ogre warrior and Keys to be nullified. Even the ogre, who was as heavy as an elephant, was cleverly neutralized by the leader of the goblin's guards, the golem warrior. Neru's flail and Keys' scimitar only made a few meaningless metallic clangs when they struck the golem. It was completely ineffective. The golem warrior was like a monk. Not only did it have an indestructible body, but it also cleverly nullified the attacks of the 2 warriors as it moved. The golem, which was no different from a normal human, seemed to have been equipped with a functional module that only heavy armored golems would have: attack while defense. It only needed to occasionally throw a few jabs or slashes in between its simple defense to tire the 2 attackers out. Keys estimated that even if he transformed into a dragon or used magic, he might not be able to quickly finish off the powerful opponent in front of him. All of you, please stop. Mr. 21, please do not cause unnecessary friendly harm. The goblin noble looked at his golem friend with satisfaction. He had found and repaired this golem at the border between the Empire and Machine Realm. Back then, even though Spanner, as the #1 ruling family of the Goblin Empire, had an almost unlimited supply of materials, and Ricknaz himself was one of the top scholars in the Empire in terms of science and technology. He was known as the spanner that moves gears. Even so, he had encountered great difficulties when repairing this severely damaged but extremely precise golem warrior. Fortunately, the golem awakened after completing part of the repair work. Through communication, it guided Ricknaz to complete the final repair work. During that time, the 2 of them formed a relationship that was like a teacher and also a friend. Golem number 21, who had long forgotten its original orders because of the severe damage, voluntarily accompanied Ricknaz. Usually, it acted as the captain of the guards, and when it came to scientific research, it was the goblin's research partner. Golem number 21 had an intelligent calculation ability that other constructs could not compare to. Through learning, it had mastered more than one combat skill of a combat profession. It even mastered some unique spell-like abilities. Gentlemen, please allow me to apologize first. Just now, my team member took the initiative to launch a rude attack with ill intentions. Ricknaz bowed a little more than before. Then, he glanced at number 21. The golem who received the signal said, "Order received, Sir Commander." With a voice that sounded like a synthesized electronic voice, the golem warrior quickly retreated from the battle. He stopped Neru, who wanted to chase after it. This golem's superb martial arts and the strange, spell-like abilities that it would use from time to time showed that it was definitely a tough nut to crack. The warrior who retreated from the battle walked straight to the sea priest. The golem was only half the height of the Sawajin, but when he punched the shark-like monster's slightly light-colored abdomen, its waist bent almost 90 degrees. The female Sawajin, who could not withstand such a blow, let out a painful howl with a mouth full of sharp teeth. Blue blood flowed out of the corner of its mouth. The golem warrior's chest mechanically twisted, revealing a hole. Inside, there was a dark blue heart that was still beating with a few soft tubes inserted into it. The golem gently used its finger to touch the heart hidden in its body, and a weak electric current was released from its fingertip onto it. At this time, the Sawajin priest, who had fallen to the ground, was as if struck by lightning. Its whole body twitched, and its skin secreted a sticky liquid that looked like sweat. The goblin Riknaz walked to the priest lying on the ground and looked down at the Sawajin in a condescending manner. "Madam, please stop your little tricks. The dagger in your hand and the plan to provoke a conflict just now will bring unnecessary trouble to me and my friends. As a captive, you have to fulfill your obligation to serve me for 50 years. This is the equivalent exchange of keeping your right to breathe. I hope this is the last time. If you have similar plans, I advise you to put them away." That's because Mr. 21 will turn this last warning into an absolute fact the moment you have this kind of thought. The goblin spoke in fluent Inferno language, and Keys and Chained could easily understand. He obviously wanted to explain the reason for this conflict through narration rather than justification. After that, he once again exchanged greetings with Keys and the rest, and generously gave them some very unique goblin creations as compensation. That's the best. The misunderstanding has been cleared. Chained, who had waited for the gel to dry and forcibly broke free from the chain cocoon, waved his hand to dismiss some of the barbed demon guards who had gathered around. A bloody battle is imminent. Every bit of strength is precious. If there is such a situation again, then a meal of sashimi as a reward is also a good choice. After saying this joke that he thought was funny, the chained demon gestured as if to emphasize his determination. Chapter 34. The two consecutive conflicts made Keys more aware of the characteristics of this place. The Hell of Bator is indeed a place where compassion withers and resentment flourishes. The blue dragon teenager breathed in the sulfurous air of Avernus, the first layer of Bator. He seemed to feel the anxiety brought by the environment. I must learn to control my emotions and become the master of my emotions, not its servant. After meditating for a while and adjusting his emotions, Keys began to continue his pre-battle preparations. The three ogre brothers were sleeping soundly in another camp. Thanks to the structure of the corpus callosum in his brain, the blue dragon teenager did not need to sleep to prepare spells and do some other things. The battle with the golem just now exposed some problems. In the case of mimicry, Keys still lacked some effective means of attack in his human form. The wailing double-barreled shotgun was an antique weapon after all. It lacked power. At the same time, once 2 rounds of ammunition were fired, it had to be reloaded in time. During the battle with the golem, because he did not have time to reload, he could not use it. This made Keys realize that this weapon had a huge shortcoming in terms of continuous firepower. Apart from the issue of endurance, Keys knew that the enemies he would soon face, the Thanner Reet demons, were mostly immune to electric and poison damage through his own memories and some pre-battle information issued by the Hell of Bator. As a result, the lightning attack that he could use freely was almost useless. Unless he increased the electric current output and voltage, he could penetrate the demon's resistant skin and cause damage. But this would quickly deplete his stored energy. If he only used the curved sword as a means of attack, even if he relied on the bonus of his constitution, he could only reach the level of some high-level demons. It was absolutely impossible to crush them. And no matter how high-level the demons were, unless they were at the level of a demon lord or above, they were all expendable in the cruel, bloody battlefield. They were only slightly better than cannon fodder. As for martial arts, although he had been practicing diligently recently, and at the same time he was better at summarizing patterns and correcting them, Keyes was still not confident that he could reach the level of a real master with the same strength and speed. In today's battle with the golem was clearly unarmed and did not use too much strength. Yet, it was still able to easily suppress the combined attacks of him and an ogre warrior. This was enough to prove something. Perhaps we can refer to the design of a Gauss rifle. Keyes rubbed the double-barreled shotgun and suddenly had some inspiration. The Blue Dragon has the talent to control electromagnetic power. This ability used to be a simple spitting attack, using the power of lightning itself to kill. If I can find a way to control the electromagnetic beam, I can use electromagnetic acceleration to launch a metal bullet and convert it into a kinetic attack. Only a few demonic entities or slime monsters are immune to physical attacks. Keyes looked at the various metal warheads in front of him and nodded with satisfaction. After a whole night of practice, he figured out how to restrain his electromagnetic ability. After trying to launch an iron nail that he randomly picked up, he knew that his idea was successful. Through electromagnetic acceleration, the iron nail pierced through the uniform armor of hell that was set up nearly 1,000 meters outside the camp. In the process of collision, the iron nail rolled and caused a large hole to appear on the surface of the armor, as if it had been twisted and rubbed by a giant, and then pierced through. The requirements of continuous power and high-precision parts that originally limited the range and power of electromagnetic weapons were easily overcome under Keyes' instinctive electromagnetic control. Any metal of any shape could be launched by adjusting the electromagnetic field. However, in order to achieve a good continuous shooting speed, the Blue Dragon asked the craftsmen in the smelting workshop in the camp to create 3 standard warheads. The shuttle-shaped warhead had a high initial speed, suffered the least resistance during flight, and had the longest attack range. Together with Eagle Eye, it could achieve a precise attack on long-range targets. The oval-shaped warhead had the largest mass and had a shorter attack range, but the impact was the strongest. It was known as the super electromagnetic gun and could effectively kill large targets. The grape-like warhead had a grape-like shape. After electromagnetic acceleration, it could form the effect of a short-range shotgun. It could cover an area and kill the surrounding enemy targets. There were 1,000 warheads of each type, and Keyes also asked the fire elemental craftsmen in the camp to make the same batch every day. In order to store the ammunition, Keyes also bought a spatial storage belt from the Gnome Noble. As a reward, Keyes copied a dozen magic scrolls for Riknaz and modified a large number of alchemy bombs for the Gnome Magician. Keyes completed this work with the help of the Ogre Magician Blue. He was not the only one who was busy preparing for the bloody battle. A pair of huge crab claws stabbed into the rock wall and brought down a piece of gravel. Another pair of arms stretched out from the front of the chest, tightly clung to the edge of the rock, and supported the head of a vicious dog with horns. This was a Glabrizu that was more than 18 feet tall and weighed nearly 3 tons. Although the demons in the abyss were different from the devils in Bator, there was no difference between the demons of each race. In fact, experts who were proficient in demonology generally believed that their rank was determined by their strength, and there was no rule to follow. Even the lowest abyssal worms and dretch could grow to become a demon lord. However, the average individual strength of each demon race was definitely different. Similarly, the probability of a Baelor becoming a demon lord was definitely much higher than that of a dretch. Although the Glabrizu was not the top demon race, it was definitely one of the best in the abyss. Those traitors, perjurers, and other evil souls who betrayed their country were most likely to become this kind of demon after falling into the abyss. They were used to using their fierce appearance to cover their treacherous nature. Of course, being used to betrayal and liking to conspiracy did not mean that they were smarter than others. In the abyss, there were still a lot of Glabrizu that fell into the trap of other demons. For example, Gurgen. This evil demon that had been born for more than 7,000 years had once entered the acid fog canyon, the 473rd level of the abyss, because it had blindly believed in the fragmented information brought about by some prophecy spells. It carried the sweet dream of eating demon worms every day and entered the 473rd level of the abyss. He thought it was a cafeteria, but when he arrived, he found that it was actually a kitchen. What was even more terrifying was that Gergen himself had become an ingredient in the kitchen. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of sneaking into other planes. However, the burning skywalkers hovering in the sky, the planar laws modified by the tyrant worm, had caused many demons more powerful than him to succumb to their fate. The nature of demons was ferocious, but they were not fearless of death. If the demons in the material plane were killed, they would be demoted by the will of the abyss, and they would climb out of the blood pool at the bottom of the abyss to become an abyssal worm and continue to evolve. Although this was terrifying, it was not hopeless. However, if they were killed in the abyss, then there was no hope of immunity. Death was death. Gergen could not forget the scene of a powerful Baylor dying under the siege of an army of burning sky walkers and constantly twisting Scourge Swarm. It had no choice but to end its life with a self-immolation explosion. He chose to compromise and obediently accepted the parasitism of the acid worms, becoming a candidate for the Scourge Swarm. Because of this, he was given a chance to live. However, out of nature, the Glabrizi used deceit, and other means to make the intelligent acid worms in his body fight for dominance of his future body. Objectively speaking, his plan was close to success. Originally, with the Glabrizu's physique, it would only take a dozen years for the Glabrizu to be completely occupied by the worms, and the process of erosion into a swarm of worms was greatly prolonged. After 100 years, the worm still could not completely control the creature and evolve into a powerful demon unique to the acid fog canyon. However, these acid worms that used the Glabrizu's body as a battlefield and devoured each other for nearly 100 years finally emerged as the final victor, occupying almost the entire pincer of the Glabrizu. The whole crab pincer emitted a dark, rotten color. Upon closer inspection, one could see the sticky tail of the worm wriggling under the dark green skin. This worm, in the form of a symbiotic body, had become a brand new promotion template for the acid mist worm. We finally escaped from that damn place. The bloody battle was imminent, and Avernus was gradually approaching the abyssal plane that they were about to conquer. Before both sides could mobilize their armies to the gray plains that connected the two planes for a head-on confrontation, both sides had placed many frontline spies through the weak points between the planes. In order to achieve this tactical strike, the tyrant worm even unlocked the dimensional lock that had been suppressing the plane and sent a group of demons to Avernus to secretly investigate the enemy they were about to face. Gergen had come to Avernus through a newly formed plane passage. Following Gergen were half a dozen vulture-like Vroks. They flapped their wings and flew out of the pit before the Glabrizu. At this time, they were hiding in a small cave at the edge of the cliff, waiting quietly. They needed to gradually adapt to the slight weakening of the body caused by the order tendency of the abyssal plane. Glabrizu, you need to move quickly. The great tyrant worm did not send you here for a vacation. The worm that parasitized Gergen's pincer had evolved the ability to communicate telepathically. Compared to the ordinary Tanari, the Order of Abyssal Plane had a stronger weakening effect on a creature that had part of the ancient Obilus demon's genetic information. The Glabrizu could feel a deep sense of powerlessness in its pincer, which only had a faint feeling of being parasitized. The parasitic worm's breathing holes were violently opening and closing, as if it wanted to quickly adapt to the air environment here. Indeed, we need to move quickly. The Glabrizu, who had just climbed up the cliff, raised its pincer and chopped down on its pincer, which had become gray and shriveled due to the parasitism. At the base of the other pincer, half of its pincer was chopped off. As if it was not its own body, the huge pincer clamped on the pincer that had not been chopped off and pulled hard. With the help of the arm-like appendages on its chest, the parasitized pincer completely fell off. Blood and bone fragments were scattered all over the ground. Perhaps it was because of the parasitism of the acid mist worm's flesh, emerald green blood flowed out of the pincer's severed pincer, and the black blood that was common to Tana reaped demons dripped from the severed pincer's body. "Gurgen, how dare you!" The acid mistworm that had parasitized the pincer of the Glabrizu did not die. It kept cursing and threatening Gurgen. However, the Glabrizu responded to the telepathic message of the parasite that was originally its amulet with a hammer of chaos. No, 2, 3, until the pincer's pincer and Lyman's acid mistworm were smashed into minced meat. The Glabrizu, whose body was still dripping with blood, let out a joyful howl. The 6 Vroks that were hiding around were all attracted by the sound. When they gathered around and saw Gurgen's severed pincer in the small pit with emerald green liquid in front of it, they all understood the reason. "Not doing anything? Or do you want to fight me?" The Glabrizu opened its mouth that looked like a vicious dog's and revealed a sneer. A few Vroks looked at each other as if they had received some inspiration. They used their sharp beaks and claws to pull out parasitic acid mistworms from each other's feather-covered bodies. Some were casually thrown to the ground and trampled to death. Some were thrown into their mouths and chewed. From time to time, 1 or 2 of them would curse in the abyssal language because their companions had scratched them. The same thing kept happening as more and more demons climbed out of the pit. By the time the crack in the plain disappeared, thousands of demons had gathered at the edge of the pit. The Glabrizu used its strength to command these demons that were sent to Avernus to do reconnaissance work. The occasional demons that disobeyed its orders were all turned into its own nutrients. With these nutrients from the abyss, the Glabrizu's severed pincer on the left had grown back, but it was slightly smaller than the right one. Wiping the flesh and blood that flowed out of its mouth, Gurgen, who had eaten a full meal of Tana re-flesh, looked at the demons gathered around him. It was only then that he remembered what he should do now. As demons, the Tana Re's nature of resisting order would make every creature who tried to manage them collapse. Even the demon lord could only instruct them to do some simple things. However, as compensation, the demons of the abyss far exceeded their eternal enemy, the Batsid devil, who lived in Bator. Demon commanders often had dozens of times more soldiers to consume than demon commanders, so they had a higher margin of error. Even as a scouting team, the Glabrizu had thousands of Tana Re to consume, and there were no less than tens of thousands of teams with the same mission. So for the demons, the so-called scouting of the enemy was very simple. Gurgen did not think that he could be stronger than the demon lord, so he just pointed in a direction and roared in the abyssal language. "Attack in this direction, find those hypocritical demons hiding, and kill them all." Simple and effective orders, easy to understand and easier to execute. As long as all the demons were dead, Gurgen's mission would be completed. As a Glabrizu, he could use a greater teleportation spell to escape at any time. As for whether he would return to report, it depended on the plan at the time. It had to be said that this was very demonic. Chapter 35. The heroes of the Broombrows gang were in for a bad time. Under the suggestion of an unscrupulous battle strategist, the thugs were assigned to repair the defensive fortifications of the mercenary camp so that they wouldn't waste their energy. With the strict supervision of the barbed demon guards and ample supplies, the watchtowers, ridged walls, shooting parapets, and trenches were repaired in just a few thousand working hours. However, the price they had to pay was that the thugs, who were always in high spirits, turned into shrimps after work every day. Fortunately, Bator never mistreated the mercenaries from other planes when it came to food. Most of the demons in the lower planes didn't need to eat, and the thousands of planes that were responsible for providing supplies for the bloody war that was about to break out in Avernus were more than enough to provide all kinds of food for the mercenaries on the material planes. The livestock, slaves, soldiers, and even demons that died of illness, exhaustion, murder, or even punishment would not go to waste. Their flesh and blood would be minced and compressed into large luncheon meat cans, which would then be sterilized at high temperatures to ensure that no one would die from eating them. Finally, the cans would be shipped to the mercenary camps in other planes as protein-rich food supplements. Gourmet Brew was originally very interested in this technology, but when he wanted to learn it, He was told that he had to pay a high patent fee to the logistics department of Bator, and when he secretly cooked it for Keys and his brothers to taste, he finally gave up on the idea of learning this dark cuisine. Of course, Dalton and his brothers didn't know the raw materials and manufacturing methods of the canned food. They were only amazed at the richness of Bator that allowed them to eat meat for every meal, and lamented the fact that the food was a little greasy. It would be perfect if they had beer with rich bubbles like the ones in Soft Maple City. But the canned food was really satisfying. Just like that, Broom Eyebrows thugs were able to complete the basic fortifications with canned meat for every meal. But it was obvious that the demons wouldn't give them a few days to rest. The iconic building of Avernus, the Bronze Citadel, was already at the 13th floor and was still being expanded. Therefore, these unlucky fellows were arranged to continue widening the moat outside the already repaired city wall and build another outer city wall. The only thing that made them happy was the fact that new mercenaries from other planes had been sent into the camp over the past few days. Many of them had committed crimes and were sent to the construction site to be reformed through labor. The Broom Brows gang had found another target to bully. "You wretch, you only know how to slack off. Don't tell me you want to eat a whip?" The boss was the boss. Even in this devil's big construction site, Dalton quickly mixed into the privileged class. To be honest, the average Barb Fiend guard was no match for this barbarian fighter in terms of strength. In Bateau, strength was the guarantee of status, and status was the symbol of strength. Dalton had the strength comparable to the Barb Demon Guards. Naturally, he was silently regarded as a supervisor instead of a laborer. Dalton was especially happy today. It could be said that today was the happiest day since he came to Bator. It was because a group of old acquaintances, the leaders of the Mad Dog Gang, who had opposed him in Soft Maple City, were also sent to this godforsaken place. And it seemed that they were even more miserable than him. They only brought a few subordinates and could only work under the supervision of his whip. F***CK. That's what I said. I'm not the only one who did so many wicked things. Why should I go to hell alone? Dalton thought happily. The whip in his hand was not idle. From time to time, he would find Doug, who was known as Mad Dog. The quality of the leather whips produced in Bator hell was absolutely guaranteed. When it hit a person, it would make a crisp sound like breaking a tree branch. The person being whipped would also experience the knee-burst gentle reminder attached to the whip, which would bring sharp and unbearable pain to the victim. If Doug, the Mad Dog, had not been so tough that he was immune to some of the effects of the whip, he would have been twitching on the ground like a dead dog. "Damn you, son of a bitch. I curse you to take root in this place that suits you, until you grow mold and maggots." Mad Dog smashed his pickaxe into the soft red soil of Avernus. He imagined that the rock on the ground was Broom Brows Dalton's skull, and that he would smash it into pieces. "Ho ho ho, mortal, do you need some help?" A voice suddenly sounded in Doug's ears. If it were not for the crunching sound that sounded like crabs, the voice would have sounded kind and honest, just like the stubborn new judge in Soft Maple City. "Who are you?" Doug looked around and asked warily in a low voice. He did not see who was talking to him. He realized that the voice was probably a telepathic ability, just like the evil demon who tricked him into coming to this godforsaken place. "Who am I? That's not important. I'm just a passerby who can't stand the oppression and exploitation here. Don't you want more power to break the shackles on your neck?" The voice said patiently. Doug rudely interrupted the voice. "Listen, I won't fall for your evil tricks again. Although I want power, it's fine as long as you admit that you want power," the person who asked the question interrupted Doug. As the voice sounded, a light that looked like a curtain of water flashed. The Glabrizu, who was still invisible around Doug, cast its monthly spell-like ability, Limited Wish. It could only be cast with the consent of the target, and the target could only be immortal. The Glabrizu was a master of deceit and lies. It was used to using this spell-like ability to satisfy the wishes of mortals who succumbed to its lies or tricks. However, most of the wishes would be distorted by the Glabrizu. Some people wished that they could be rich, but in the end, they might find that they were indeed rich after being teleported to an uninhabited island. Some people wish that they could be loved, but in the end, they found that the one who fell in love with them might be an alien creature from nowhere. And so on. The Glabrizu would not really help a mortal to fulfill their wishes. They were not afraid to distort the wishes of the petitioners with the greatest malice, provided that the mortals agreed to accept their help. Ho ho ho. The Glabrizu looked at the werewolf Doug, whose snout protruded, his legs turned into an anti-joint structure, and his hands turned into sharp claws. The Glabrizu laughed with satisfaction. Go and tear him apart. Go and take revenge. Go and vent your dissatisfaction with this place. Puppy. The mad dog had turned into a vicious wolf. As soon as Doug transformed into a werewolf, he turned into a black shadow and pounced on his favorite prey, Broom Eyebrows Dalton. The elite barbarian warrior was as surprised as the others at Doug's sudden transformation, but it did not affect his counterattack. Before the vicious wolf pounced on him, Dalton threw away the whip in his hand and put on his beloved steel boxing gloves. He twisted his waist, sucked in his stomach, and leaned slightly to the side to avoid the werewolf's pounce. Then he used the spiked boxing gloves to greet his old friend, who had turned into a monster. The werewolf's sharp claws only left some scratches on Dalton's armor, but Dalton's punch directly smashed the right side of his face. Puppy, come a daddy. Ha ha. Dalton ignored Broom Eyebrows' provocation. It was also possible that Doug had lost the ability to understand language after turning into a werewolf. There were pros and cons. The torn cheek muscles contracted a few times, and the wound was under control. It was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Dalton's eyes darkened when he saw the change in Mad Dog. An opponent who could regenerate was the greatest challenge for a warrior. He stopped taunting the enemy and prepared to take the initiative to attack. He wanted to finish off this potential threat as soon as possible. However, as he changed his tactics, Mad Dog also changed his habit of risking his life to attack. As soon as Dalton launched his attack, the werewolf turned and fled, waiting for an opportunity to attack some of his minions. Taking their lives did not even slow him down. Damn it, what's wrong with Mad Dog? It was still a bit difficult to chase after the werewolf with 2 legs. Dalton's attacks could never hit the werewolf. In the short span of a dozen breaths, 5 to 6 laborers on the construction site had their necks slit by the sharp claws of the werewolves. Moreover, every time the werewolves killed a person, a streak of blood would appear on their claws. After taking a dozen lives, the blood at the tip of his claws seemed to have solidified. Suddenly, he howled, and the blood-red light flowed into his body through the wolf's mouth. All his muscles and bones instantly swelled, and his werewolf body changed again. 2 arms with sharp claws broke through the skin between his ribs. After completing his new evolution, Werewolf Doug no longer fled. He turned around and attacked Dalton again. The Barb Fiend guards in the area quickly learned of the situation, and they all hurried over. Keys and the others were even faster than them. They were meditating in the camp. When the Glabrizu cast Limited Wish, the Blue Dragon Boy, who had a keen sense for magical fluctuations, noticed something. Chapter 36. Enemy Attack. After identifying the type of magic wave in the air, Keys quickly realized that someone had cast a limited prayer spell. This was the specialty of the Glabrizu. After receiving Keys' warning, all the high-level combatants in the camp, including the chained demons, understood that a battle was about to break out. From top to bottom, the war machine of Bator began to operate. Armor and weapons were quickly distributed to every soldier. There was no need to mobilize for war. Demon officers of all levels led their soldiers to an appropriate position in an orderly manner. There was only the clamor of the mercenaries in the camp, but it was quickly suppressed by the supervision team led by Chained Demon himself. In the Hell of Batsu, they had to abide by the rules. There was no need to shout and cheer. The Batsu Devils only believed that order and discipline were the guarantee of victory. Mr. Keys, the camp's bastion, is suspected to have encountered a disturbance caused by the demons. Since you're the first person to discover this problem, I need you to lead a small group to find the Glabrizu that's causing the destruction and the source of the disturbance. before the demons launch a large-scale attack. We need to send enough soldiers to defend the perimeter. Keyes had no objections to the arrangement of the chained demons acting as commander. Standing at the edge of the newly built battlements, he immediately saw the berserk werewolf causing chaos. He took an unloaded treadmill crossbow from the barbed demon soldier beside him, drew it with his hand, aimed, and fired. His movements were smooth and fluid. The crossbow bolts made from the spikes of the spiked demons cut through the air without making the slightest sound. The 3 bolts installed in the crossbow flew out in succession, covering the werewolf's possible movements in a triangular formation. 2 crossbow bolts missed, but the third one, which was about to miss, seemed to have hit something. With an angry roar, the Glabrizu's figure appeared from the effect of the veil of concealment. The spikes of the spiked demons had the effect of penetrating armor. The thick scales were pierced through without any resistance. Fortunately, the thick muscles tightly clamped the arrow, preventing it from entering. The infernal power on the tip of the arrow made the Glabrizu, who was not used to Avernus's laws, feel even more pain. Well done. The Batsu around him all cheered for Keyes. But only he knew that in order to look cool, not only did he cast hold on the werewolf, he even added the effect of guidance on the crossbow bolts he shot out. But in the end, with a guilty conscience, the blue dragon boy threw the crossbow to its original user. He pulled out his sword and jumped down from the city wall. As expected, he was destined to be a melee fighter. Following closely behind was the ogre Neru. The ogre had been crafting many good things for himself in the blacksmith shop for the past few days. When he landed on the ground outside the bastion, a few laborers who were about to escape back to the city were immediately knocked down. Number 21, you don't have to worry about me. You can go down and relax. The goblin Renaz, who was also standing on the battlements, looked at his mechanical puppet friend who was eager to fight after discovering the enemy, and said in a friendly tone, I have enough half-golem guards here. Just be careful not to accidentally hurt your allies. Mechanical puppet number 21 seemed to be happy when it heard that. The red light in its eye sockets flickered for a moment, and it let out an electronically synthesized voice. Roger that. Decepticons attack. Keyes, who heard the voice, could not help but turn around to look at the mechanical puppet in surprise. Doug, who had turned into a werewolf, pounced on the blue dragon boy when it noticed that the enemy was distracted. It used its sharp claws to tear the boy's throat. Then, there was no then. Keyes, who was a little annoyed by the sneak attack, used his fist to punch the werewolf's soft abdomen. It was as if he was hit by a megalosaurus. This was also the truth. The werewolf's eyes burst due to the sudden increase in blood pressure, and its spine was directly broken into several pieces. It was like a rag doll that had been trampled on, and it flew back faster than it pounced on Kieran. Keyes leaned forward and slashed with his sword. The werewolf's head was separated from its body in midair. You think you can disobey the law just because you're a minor? Seriously. The mechanical puppet uttered a series of words that were incomprehensible. It overtook Neru, who had adjusted his posture and was ready to charge. It swept past Quess and ran directly towards the only remaining opponent in its sight. Glabrizu Gurgan had already pulled out the crossbow arrow embedded in its body. It did not care how much blood and minced meat it had brought out in such a crude way. The first thing it did was to insert the arrow that brought it pain into the body of the nearest creature. The eye socket of an unlucky broom eyebrows gang member became the final destination of the crossbow arrow. Ha! The Glabrizu, who had done this, laughed. Inflicting pain on the innocent was the best medicine for it. The stinging pain caused by the accumulated purgatory power in the wound did not seem so unbearable. Gurgan moved its injured appendages and commissary, and then fought with the mechanical puppet warrior who had already rushed over. Soon, he could not laugh anymore. In just an instant, even if the mechanical warrior was still empty-handed, sweeping, chopping, pushing, cutting, sweeping, blocking, slashing, piercing, all kinds of techniques made the Glabrizu only have the ability to block and not have the ability to fight back. Gurgan was sure that the guy in front of him must have a high monk profession level, but he did not know if he could still use advanced professional skills such as shock punch, combat aura strike, and infiltration. Of course, the Glabrizu had no intention of continuing to experience it himself. He was not a Hezru who completely relied on his physical strength to fight. He had so many innate spells that he did not use. Did he want to learn from the kind paladins and pay attention to fairness in battle? In the gap between the mechanical puppet's punches, Gurgen activated mirror image. 10 Glabrizu appeared around the mechanical puppet at the same time, and they surrounded it. All the mirror images moved in the same way, and even the expressions on their faces were the same. Be careful of the hammer of chaos. Of course, this was not a warning from the Glabrizu. Key saw that the Glabrizu had already used spell-like abilities, and it was easy to guess his battle plan. To use mirror image to distract the mechanical puppet warrior, and then use the hammer of chaos to launch a sneak attack. This was a common tactic used by the Glabrizu. Before Keys could finish his warning, the Glabrizu surrounding mechanical puppet number 21 opened and closed their commissary at the same time, making a uniform clicking sound. Dozens of hammer of chaos were all focused on the place where the mechanical puppet stood. It was like a series of high-explosive grenades exploding on the spot. In an instant, the dust raised completely annihilated the mechanical puppet. Ha! After doing this, the Glabrizu laughed heartily. Because of excitement, his commissary kept making a snapping sound as they opened and closed each other. A smashed mechanical puppet. Before he could finish his proud words, a heavy punch landed on his face. It was as if he had been hit by a heavy cannon. The bewitching demon fell from the sky. His entire face and half of his teeth were smashed together. Mechanical puppet number 21, who leaped out of the smoke and dust caused by the hammer of chaos, had a body made of adamantine and mithril that was slightly damaged. However, where the magic power tore, the remaining metals bit into each other, and the senseless gears nested in turn. These damages were repaired at a speed visible to the naked eye. You're not the purple potato spirit. What's the use of snapping your fingers? Chapter 37. Of course, Gurgen was not a purple potato spirit. He was just one of the hundreds of millions of Tana Reed demons. He's still alive. Seriously, this guy is not a distant relative of a cockroach or a water bear, is he? Looking at the Glabrizu whose head was blown off but still standing upright, Mechanical Man 21 used his finger to dig at the healed wound torn by the hammer of chaos. He then looked at Keys and Neru, who wanted to take advantage of the situation to finish off the guy. You're still alive, even after being hit by a big move. Do you really want to kill me? But his worries were unnecessary. Just as Nalu's flail and Kith's sword were about to land on the Glabrizu immediately used another life-saving spell-like ability, greater teleportation. Yo, you even brought a return scroll? Gurgen directly teleported back to the middle of the army of demons that had been arranged in advance. As soon as he woke up from the falling state of teleportation, he used his commissary to turn the two closest Tana Reet demons into 4 at lightning speed. He did this to cover up his serious injuries and intimidate his companions who regarded betrayal and killing as a common occurrence. The second reason was to get some healing medicine. He carefully spread the fresh demon flesh on his face, and the wound slowly healed under the nourishment of Tana Ree's flesh. When his teeth grew back, the Glabrizu stuffed the remaining limbs into his mouth. He did not want to waste anything. The method was appropriate and the effect was remarkable. It not only intimidated the demons, but also healed the injury. There's a disgusting Batsu gathering place ahead. You bastards, charge for me for the abyss. Gurgen chewed as he ordered the demon army, who could no longer suppress their desire to kill, to attack in a muffled voice. Without the pressure of stronger demons, these demons who were smuggled into Avernus released their instincts and charged in the direction pointed out by the Glabrizu. These vanguard troops, who were originally used as spies by the demon lord to spy on Bader's military deployment, had completely forgotten their original mission. Perhaps they had not forgotten that many demons had higher intelligence than mortals. However, Their instinctive desire to tear their enemies apart and swallow them alive, as well as their irrepressible eternal hatred for the Batsa devil, made them choose to launch a suicide squad attack. The demons that the Glabrizu had arranged for were more than 10 kilometers away from Barthol's mercenary camp. After receiving the order to attack, they immediately chose to charge. The army rushed towards the target like a scattered and unstoppable tide. It was impossible for any army in the material plane to launch a charge at such a long distance. Even cavalry riding horses would be exhausted after such a long distance. But Tana Ri's demons did not care about these problems at all. They seemed to have endless stamina. The first demons to arrive on the battlefield were not Vroks that could fly. The fireballs falling from the sky of Avernus caused quite a bit of trouble for these winged demons. Their small bodies and ordinary flames did not seem to be able to withstand the bombardment of fireballs. A group of Hezru, who looked like large toads and had damp skin like armor, became the vanguard of the demon army. These behemoths, which exuded a stench that no creatures, including the other Tanari, could tolerate, opened their big mouths full of teeth and moved quickly on the ground on all fours. As they ran, the mucus they secreted turned the slightly sulfurous soil they walked on into smelly mud. Even the other Tana carefully avoided the path of these guys. If they got stuck to them, they would have to dig out their skin to get rid of the maddening stench. The long-distance attack of the demons gave the camp guards some time to prepare. The chaos caused by Mad Dog Doug's transformation into a werewolf had been contained. All the laborers had been properly arranged. They were given standard spears and tower shields. They stood on the second layer of the wall that they built themselves, ready to defend against the incoming demon army. Lord Commander, the goblin noble, Riknaz, stood beside the Batsa devil. Riknaz, the goblin noble, was a little happy when he heard Riknaz omitting the word agent. He pointed at the demons coming from afar. There are at least 5,000 demons attacking. Even if there are not many powerful demons, the number of them is still 5 times more than the total combat force in the camp. I'm afraid your calculation is still too conservative. Keys, who had retreated to the inner wall, interrupted the goblin. Every Tana has the ability to summon their own kind of fight. The more powerful a demon is, the more of its kind it can summon. Even if the Order of Bador suppresses the success rate of their spell casting, we will not face less than twice the number of enemies that we estimated. Riknaz nodded, indicating that he had understood this variable that was not included in the calculation. The chained demon waved his arm out of habit, making the sound of chains rubbing against each other. He said nonchalantly, "It's really nothing. After participating in a few bloody battles, you will know that demons are always like this. They swarm and then get slaughtered. The difference of 5 or 10 times the number is just that you need to wave your weapon a few more times or pull the bowstring. This is just a small scene. It's just an infiltration before the war begins." This time, Keys did not refute. He had not personally experienced a real bloody battle. However, from the looks of it, the demons that appeared here did not pose a threat to his life. The dangerous Leakin demons and Baylor demons would only appear later on in the main battlefield. In this battle, even if all the soldiers in the camp were killed, Keys was confident that he could escape with his ogre companions. The goblin noble and the chained demon also had the same idea. Otherwise, they would not have the time to stand on the city wall and admire the demon's attack. However, compared to the confidence of these people on the city wall, the guards standing on the second layer of the city wall, the laborers who were originally building the fortifications, were not so assured. Most of them did not have any decent weapons or defensive equipment other than the spears and tower shields that they were given. Even if the Batsu devils who managed the camp never bothered to confiscate the various weapons brought by these country bumpkins from the material plane, one could not expect knives and sticks, which could only be used in the alleys of the city, to hurt those terrifying monsters who were waving their claws and charging over with their bloody mouths. That's right, those monsters. Most of the mercenaries who were tricked to work here did not know the difference between the Tana demons and the Batsa demon. With their poor knowledge, They only instinctively knew that these monsters that looked terrifying and even more terrifying in battle were evil demons from the lower world. Only when they came to hell did they know that the ghosts that only existed in the stories of their grandmother actually existed. But now, when they faced the attack of the Tana demon army, they realized that their definition of ghosts might be a little too narrow. What kind of evil was that? It was no longer a ghost story, but a creature that would only appear in the most horrifying nightmares had rushed before them. Compared to them, the barbed demon guards who were spitting sulfuric saliva and whipping them could even be described as benevolent. The first unfortunate soldier faced a little dretch. Some of the Hezru at the front of the demon army had not rushed near the city wall yet, and they changed their running posture. Some of them directly used their spell-like ability to summon some dretches. Some of them saved this spell-like ability in order to summon another Hezru. They simply grabbed some weaker demons from the demon army behind them and threw them directly onto the high wall of the camp, ignoring their bites and curses. There were no ladders, no ants attacking the city. The first wave of attackers easily appeared on the city wall. Most of the demons that were thrown over were dretches that were about the size of half-humans, and smaller quasits that were not even as big as candlesticks. Most of the quasits that could fly and were smarter completed their invisibility in midair. This was a tactic often used by these guys who were eager to succeed, but were extremely cowardly. But the dretches that were also thrown up were not so lucky. These stupid and slow low-level demons were quickly wiped out by the defenders on the city wall. However, the stinking cloud and some fear spells they released caused some trouble for the defenders. A few dretches that escaped the net took advantage of the fear effect and mercilessly took away the lives of the defenders. This was the nature of demons. Even if they were scared to death, they would kill whenever they had the chance. Chapter 38. Commander, why don't you use the cannons to bombard them? It was the war observer Riknaz who asked the question. He had also changed the name of the Hellscream to a name he was used to. The chained demon did not answer his question first, but made a gesture to calm him down. Before answering your question, we still have some things to do. As he spoke, a chain wrapped around the chained demon's body flew out along the edge of the city wall. An assassin who had teleported into the camp and was sneaking nearby was pierced by the tip of the chain. What are you waiting for? It was a Babu demon assassin. After being pierced by the chained demon, he struggled and roared loudly in the abyssal language. These assassins who were good at pincer attacks never acted alone, but he was the unluckiest one as he was the first to be discovered. The Tana demons did not have the intention to protect their comrades. If their comrades could escape with their lives, they would be more than happy to do so. However, there was a major mistake in his calculation. He was not the first to be discovered, and he was not even the first to be attacked. The moment the chained demon attacked, Keys pulled out his sword and cut off the head of an invisible creature nearby. The ogre Neru, who had already received his telepathic message, had also used his flail to finish off a smaller Babu demon. There was also an assassin who wanted to attack the goblin Riknaz, but his head was smashed by the mechanical warrior beside him. At this time, he was asking the half-golem guard for some leather to wipe off the demon's protective mucus on his iron fist. Those who put acid on their body are really tasteless. The mechanical warrior seemed to have a problem with the demon assassin because the decorative pattern on his fist was corroded a little. The chained demon also felt the same way. The chain wrapped around his body was not as luxurious as the mechanical warrior's. It was made of a large amount of mithril, so part of it was corroded by the mucus on the Babu demon's body. Isn't that right? As if responding to the words of number 21, the chained demon casually threw him into the group of barbed demon guards who were sharpening their swords at the bottom of the wall. This was a small episode. He did not forget Riknaz's question. Your Excellency Riknaz, I'm sure you've already noticed that most of the Thana demons are undisciplined idiots. Just like those little bugs that had just sneaked in. They probably did not come to assassinate under the orders of the great demon, but because of their own vulgar interests and inferior nature. In fact, if we were to use Hellscream first, please forgive me for having to correct your vocabulary. Nobody knew what would happen to the Tana army after being hit by the artillery fire. Perhaps they would continue to attack, or perhaps they would disperse. There was also the possibility that some of the more powerful ones would use advanced teleportation to teleport over. The consequence of such a disorderly situation was that the efficiency of Bader's warriors in slaughtering these scumbags would be reduced. This kind of disorder is intolerable to any knowledgeable person. Chained Demon could not help but feel indignant when he said this. He seemed to recall some of the memories he did not want to recall in the long years. Therefore, all commanders who have the experience of fighting demons will choose a wiser tactical approach. First, let some of the demons come over to engage in combat. With strict discipline, a stable fortress, and excellent weapons, we can enter a stalemate with the demons on the local battlefield. This is the best time for Hellscream to appear. The area covered by the artillery fire can form an artificial isolation zone, and only a small number of demons can replenish the battlefield in front. This is the time for us to concentrate our elite forces and efficiently strangle the stupid demons who are still fighting with our defense system. Chained Demon saw that Riknaz still had doubts. In order not to offend the big shot arranged by the higher-ups, he patiently continued to explain. The demons' ignorance and inferiority were a great help to us right now. Even though the low-level demons were scared to death, there was still slaughter and battle ahead of them. The remaining high-level demons would still lead or order them to continue onwards. Apart from a moment when the axes appeared, the remaining high-level demons would only regret not being able to enjoy the battle in time. In fact, as long as we use the right tactics and pay attention to the artillery fire at all times, we can easily eliminate these demons in front of us. This number of demons is just like what I just said. It's just a small scene. After listening to Chained Demon's words, Keyes understood that the Batsa demons had never regarded artillery as the main killing weapon. From their tactical point of view, it was only used as a safety valve to adjust the demon's offensive. This also explained a problem that had always troubled the Blue Dragon. How could this weapon deal with the high-level demons with various teleportation spells? In this way, the Batsa demon probably did not have a saying like the truth is within the range of the artillery. For them, it should be the battle is within the range of the artillery. They used unique tactical means to build a meat grinder that efficiently slaughtered the Tana Reed demons. Of course, the defenders on the second city wall who were resisting the demons' first wave of attack did not have the mindset to think about tactics and strategies like quests. The biggest problem they faced was how to survive, or at least how to live a little longer. With the approaching demon army, a large number of summoned dretches appeared in the defensive formation, and the barb demons who were originally supervising the battle had to join the ranks of cleaning up these low-level demons. Some of the mercenaries with spell-casting ability could no longer continue to hide at this time. They had to use wind spells to disperse the pale yellow clouds released by the dretches and blow away the invisible quasits that were ready to launch a sneak attack with their poison claws. Of course, compared to the demon attack that followed, this could only be called trouble. When the Hezru moved to the edge of the wall and began to climb or teleport directly to the wall, the real crisis came. The first thing to bear the brunt was the unbearable stench. The smell was 100 times worse than the stench released by the dretches. Many mercenaries from other planes who were close to these filthy demons directly fell into endless vomiting. Broom Eyebrows Dalton, who was standing at the back, was very glad. As soon as the demons appeared, he quickly put on a mask with a poisonous gas protection enchantment effect that he obtained when he dominated Soft Maple City. Otherwise, he could not guarantee that he could withstand the stench that went into his brain and stomach as soon as it entered his nose. As for how lethal this stench was, Dalton saw with his own eyes the scene of a half-inferno Tauren mercenary who was strong enough to wrestle head-on with the monsters climbing up, almost vomiting his intestines out after being splashed in the face by the guy's liquid. While the guards were fighting a bloody battle on the outer city walls and the square of the Barbican, the camp's long-range support arrived. The Barb demon guards, standing on the higher city walls, were all equipped with tread crossbows. The standard weapons of Bator were different from the same weapons in the material plane. The bow of the crossbow was not made of wood or other composite materials. The bow of the hellish crossbow was made of extremely elastic steel, so even the demons who had much stronger arms than the mortals had to use their feet to complete the work of loading the crossbow. Of course, the power of these crossbow bolts was also quite shocking. The Hezru, who were attacked by the spears of the defenders on the outer wall, were also in danger of dying under the barrage of crossbow bolts. The Vrak, who were circling like vultures and waiting for an opportunity to harass the enemy, could not withstand more than a few crossbow bolts and could only dodge in the air. For a moment, the sound of bowstring twanging could be heard all around. A barbed demon centurion saw Keyes' superb archery and offered him a brand new crossbow. This flattering gesture was ignored by the Blue Dragon youth. He turned his head and let the ogres Blue and Palu look at their brothers who were excited by the battle and wanted to fight. At the same time, Keyes also noticed that the goblin nobleman beside him was writing something down, as if he was writing something down. The half-golem guard behind him was constantly taking over the things he wrote and handing him new blank pages. Mechanical puppet number 21 was currently leaning against the battlements in boredom. Occasionally, it would use its hand to poke at the Murloc shaman's heart. Then, it would look at the Murloc who couldn't make a sound because of the mouth-sealing device on it, and let out a sneer. Chapter 39. After being baptized by the Batsa Devil's arrow rain, the third Hezru had died. The Tana, wreathed demons who were besieging the city, finally woke up from their indulgence in destroying and tearing flesh with their clenched fists and extended claws. The demons began to use their innate, spell-like abilities in battle. The seemingly dumb Hezru began to use the Hammer of Chaos, which was also their specialty. Any target that was hit by this spell-like ability would feel like they had been hit by an invisible battering ram. Only a small number of mercenaries equipped with life-saving enchantment equipment were able to survive this attack. That was not the end of it. If the Hammer of Chaos did not wipe out the enemy, the Hezru would use the blasphemous whisper. Any defenders with a god they believed in would fall into the negative effects of the collapse of their faith under the influence of the malevolent whispers. Their limbs would become weak due to the confusion of their thoughts, and the divine spells bestowed by their god would become unstable. At that moment, the big toad-like demons would roar and lunge forward to taste the thrill of smashing the enemy's head with their fists. But most of the time, before the Hezru could smash the victim's head, spears and claws that came out of nowhere would take away the lives of the unlucky ones. What angered the Hezru even more were the vulture-like Vraks. The Vraks that were dodging the crossbow bolts took advantage of the fact that the battlefield was in a stalemate. While the archers were focused on the more threatening demons, the Vraks gathered in twos and threes in the air and performed a dance of destruction. After 2 rounds of this dance, a wave of explosive energy would suddenly erupt. This energy could actually cover half the size of the battlefield. Apart from the demons, any creatures that were affected by this energy would be hurt. The defenders whose faith had collapsed because of the Hezru demons could not resist and were sent to the gods they believed in to confess their mistakes. The culprits of the tragedy, the circling Vrak, were like real vultures. They let out sharp screeches and dived down before quickly flying up again, seizing the opportunity to grab a piece of fresh flesh and feasting on it in the air. After that, these cunning fellows didn't forget to summon demons again, using the delicious flesh and blood as bait to lure more of their kind to join the battle. A large number of lives were harvested like a gust of wind cutting grass. If it weren't for the barbed demon guards who were supervising the battle, and the fact that the weapons and equipment distributed by the devils were better than expected, the otherworldly mercenaries standing on the city walls would not have been able to withstand the repeated attacks of the demon army. But even so, they couldn't hold on for too long. The seemingly endless attacks from the devils put too much pressure on them. Amidst the chaos, broom-brows, Dalton had no time to care about the lives of his subordinates. In fact, he had already been attacked twice by the sudden appearance of the evil demon assassin. and his life had been hanging by a thread. Fortunately, his reaction was fast enough, his strength was strong enough, and most importantly, his brain was agile enough. While this former mafia boss decisively killed, he also adjusted his position in a timely manner. He never left the side where he had the advantage in numbers. He had already seen a few of his subordinates, who were tough but not smart enough, plunged into the demon army. And then, there was no more then. With a burst of his kung fu, he used a set of punches with spiked gloves to smash the head of a vulture demon that had just swooped down to peck on the flesh. Dalton noticed that if there were less than 3 of these demons gathered together, they would not be able to cast the same AoE spell that could cover the battlefield. Therefore, he always chose to deal with these demons first. After all, the AoE spell could not be avoided by non-spellcasters no matter how agile they were. They could only take it head-on. After resisting the demon's attack for more than half an hourglass, Dalton's stamina was running low even though he was an elite barbarian warrior. This was not the time to be a hero. Broombrows turned his head and shouted. He had already noticed that there were some spellcasters among the guards. Whether it was courage, bull strength, or some other buff spell, it would be of great use now. But when he turned his head, a situation made Dalton's eyes tighten. The sweat all over his body caused by the battle seemed to have been splashed with a bucket of cold water. The spellcasters from the other plane were now being carried by the more elite barbed demons and slowly retreating from the edge of the battle to the 2 sides of the city wall. The mercenaries from the material plane, who were holding up their shields to resist the demon's attack and clamping their spears, did not notice that the number of demons standing behind them to supervise the battle had decreased by a lot. Words like bait and cannon fodder immediately came to Dalton's mind. He frowned his trademark broom eyebrows. In the past, he was very skilled in making his disobedient subordinates do the same thing. But he did not expect that today it would be his turn to be retribution. Damn it, I have to retreat immediately. No matter what kind of cannon fodder they were, it was always the best choice to leave the battle first. As soon as he thought of it, Dalton made up his mind. His figure flashed, and he hid in the blind spot of his allies. Then he gently turned the bowler hat he was wearing even in the battle on his head. This was the most valuable thing he had exchanged from the demon merchant. As a high-grade enchanted item, the bowler hat could not shoot fireballs or cast a shield, but it could shrink the wearer's body to be shorter than a halfling child, and it could avoid the penalty of strength caused by the size change. With this enchanted equipment, Dalton's second profession became his real trump card. He was a master of shadow thieves who could sneak in the shadows and kill enemies with one move. This was originally impossible for a man who was almost 7 feet tall and suspected to have barbarian blood. Even if he spent a lot of time practicing, he could not offset the effect of his body size on the effect of sneaking. If he could not master the skill of sneaking, he could not become a qualified rogue, let alone a master of shadow thieves. And this was not a world like the Berserker's Creed. The Kang sneaking technique was not sought after by rogues. Under the effect of the enchanted equipment, Dalton, who was only as tall as a normal person's calf, did not become weaker. Instead, his agility increased a lot because of his smaller body size. He cautiously passed through the gaps between the guards. Even though he was on a crowded battlefield, he still displayed the superb stealth skills of Shadow Thief. At this time, the chained demon, who was standing in the rear and observing the battlefield, withdrew from its meditative state. This cruel Batsid demon commander used its bloodline warlock ability and naturally threw a fireball at the Hezra demons who were fighting on the outer wall. However, this fireball did not have the desired effect. Before it fell on the Tana Ari, a giant hand grabbed it like grabbing an apple and stuffed it into the mouth of a howling dretch next to it. The dretch's intestines were pierced through after a muffled pop. But the one who caused all this was laughing at the shank on the wall with its mouth full of sharp teeth. But the Hezru's mockery was immediately drowned out by a louder sound. This part of the battlefield that had fallen into a bitter battle and the situation was tipping in favor of the demons suddenly erupted with a series of loud explosions. Lines of fire spread out from the cracks of the bricks on the city walls. It was like a fast-growing vine, covering the entire area of the battle outside the city. Before the two sides could react, the lines of fire turned into gushing flames and exploding gravel. From the bottom to the top, a destructive flame mixed with gravel and flesh erupted. It was as if a volcano buried under the ground had just erupted. The impact of the explosion even shook the inner city wall. Fortunately, a large number of cast iron components were used to reinforce it. Otherwise, it would have ended up like the collapsed watchtower. In addition to Keys and mechanical puppet number 21, only the chain demon stood on the wall. The other guards, including the three ogre brothers, were shaken to the ground. One could imagine how much damage those unlucky people who were directly above the explosion site had suffered. Art is an explosion. This scene seemed to have stimulated the chain demon. His eyes were wide open, and the chains on his arms were like vipers fighting to spit out their tongues. He was like a neurotic wizard, and the purgatory words that came out of his mouth seemed to return the mockery that the Hezru demons had just thrown at him. Attack! 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 Chapter 40. Avernus, the first layer of Bator, was a place where fireballs would fall from the sky. There was never a shortage of sulfur and saltpeter, and the smart demons had long mastered the technique of making explosives. When building the second layer of the city walls, the chained devil had sent his trusted subordinates to bury a large number of explosives beneath the walls. This was so that they could blast at the right time to deal a heavy blow to the demons attacking the city. As for whether their allies would be hurt, it was not a test of morality for the demons. Moreover, some otherworldly mercenaries with spellcasting abilities were able to escape from the blast range and were unharmed. On the other hand, some barbed demons were left behind at the blast site. The dozen or so demons who were ordered by the chained devil to supervise the Battle of Broombrows and his gang were left behind. While the Batsa demons were immune to fire damage, the debris and shockwaves from the blast were enough to tear them apart. After all, this was Bator and not the material plane. Demons who were killed could not resurrect after 99 years. Just like the Tana Reet demons who were killed in the Abyss, the demons who died in Bator would die at the end of their lives. Without needing the chained devil to give specific orders, the Batsa demons' prearranged tactical deployment was carried out in an orderly manner. First, the Hellscream, a weapon of mass destruction with a Chinibu name, was pushed up the battlements by the demons and loaded with cannonballs and packs of explosives. After that, the crossbowmen on the walls began to focus their firepower on the Vrak demons who escaped because they were flying in the sky. The Tana Reet demons were more mobile and could affect the battle plan, so they had to be dealt with in advance. The last to be deployed was the Chained Devil's trump card, a small team of fire elemental giants. These giants, which were as tall as 4-story buildings, were the only otherworldly mercenaries that the Chained Devil had to pay for with military funds. But judging from their actual combat strength, it was a worthwhile trade. After paying enough, the mercenaries walked out of the burning gate that connected to the fire elemental plane. The leader of the team was a fire elemental war priest, followed by 3 fire elemental warriors with scorching greatswords and a fire elemental forger with a smoldering hammer. They should be the regular army of a faction in the fire elemental plane. They're here to make some extra money, Keys guessed when he saw that the fire elemental giants were neatly dressed in half-body armor and steel helmets. The weapons in their hands were not as casual as the fire elemental giants. Attack! All the demons in the pit are your targets. The chained devil excitedly ordered when he saw his trump card. The leading fire giant war priest replied with a sentence in the fire tribe's language. The prideful fire giant war priest did not bother to reply to a little chained demon in the inferno language. But disdain was disdain. They were also creatures of the lawful evil alignment, so they had no qualms about fulfilling the established contract. The fire elemental priest raised his lava hammer and covered himself and the 3 melee fire elemental warriors with a flame shield. The fire elemental forger, which belonged to the long-range troop class, threw a ball of burning flames onto the battlefield. This was a recharging spell called Flame Burst. The pit that had just calmed down was once again met with another round of explosions. When the fire elemental warriors jumped into the pit, a part of the armed barbed demon guards were already on standby around the pit, guarding against any demons that might escape. Flames could not harm the Batsa Devil. Although the demons at the front of the army had almost all died in the explosion arranged by the Chained Devil. As he had said before, the demons of Tana Re would not learn a lesson from the disaster that happened to their companions. Instead, after smelling the smell of flesh and blood that drifted out from the burning flames, the demons became even more ferocious. Even the weakest Tana Re demons wanted to run to the front and kill to their heart's content. At the same time, they wanted to see if they could get some benefits. But now, those cunning and cowardly guys, this was the preface to the habit of the Tana Re demons when they called the Batsa demons, were constantly shooting out explosive flame shells, which caused some trouble for the demon army's charge. Not all demons could casually use teleportation spells to reach the battlefield in the first place. The Tana Re demons, who had been soaked in the desire to plunder flesh and blood and defeat the demons, had turned a blind eye to the weak demons around them who were blown to pieces by the shells. Look, that's the true face of the stupid and backward Tana Re race. They never know when to advance or retreat. Killing these disorganized and chaotic fellows is more troublesome than just slaughtering lambs. We also need to prepare a mass grave for them in advance. Fortunately, we've already prepared it. The big explosion seemed to have piqued the interest of the Chained Devil. He began to comment on the battle before him. When he was in high spirits, the Chained Devil's forked tongue would make a hissing sound like a scorpion's tongue, and his fists wrapped in chains would smash on the battlements, leaving a small piece of cracked rock. Of course, whether it was cowardly and cunning or ignorant and backward, these were the slanderous words used by the two evil races who had been fighting each other for countless years. Any other race that had some sense and wanted to survive the bloody war would not believe these words. Anyway, Keyes was not in the mood to listen to the nonsense of the Chained Devil beside him. As for the others, while the three Ogre brothers were simple-minded, they were not stupid enough to believe the nonsense of someone who had betrayed his allies. While the goblin noble Riknaz appeared polite and humble, he had stopped writing on the scroll when the chained demon was spouting nonsense. The fact that he had stopped writing on the scroll was enough to show his true attitude. Villains die from talking too much. This was the final prophecy given by a mechanical construct who had nothing better to do to the Chained Devil, who looked like he'd been through a lot of trials and tribulations, and who loved to spit when he spoke. The racial superiority theory that the commander of the demon camp was touting was not what the demons of Tana Re were concerned about. The only problem they were thinking about now was how to quickly kill the Batsa Devil who were born to die, the best and cruelest way. The mind of the original controller of the demon army, Gargantuan the Glabrizu, was filled with such tyrannical thoughts. Just when the demons had gained the upper hand in the siege battle, Gargantuan finally succumbed to his nature of enjoying slaughter and destruction. Unable to bear the loneliness, he used a high-level teleportation to come directly to the battle group. Originally, he wanted to mix in with the Devil Legion and leave without attracting the attention of the mechanical warrior monk. But he did not expect that as soon as he teleported over, he would be smacked in the face by the explosion arranged by the Chained Devil. Although he managed to survive this crisis with his physique, his current situation could no longer be described as miserable. Although his face, which had been smashed by Mechanical Man number 21, was good-looking, it still had a crooked mouth and slanted eyes. Not only that, but because of the violent explosion, the Caliceri of the Glabriza race, which we're proud of, were directly roasted by the flames. Gargantuan now looked like a crab that had been roasted red by the fire. He had already thought that if he could return alive this time, one of the two titles, Gargantuan the Crooked Mouth or Charcoal Glabrizu, would fall on his head, and there was a high probability that both would become his eternal shame. You forced me to do this. Endless anger had burned away the remaining rationality of the relatively powerful Thanner Reed Demon, and he used a means of revenge that he would never use under normal circumstances, summoning Thanner Re. Gargantuan wanted to summon an abyssal devil for revenge, and naturally, he would not choose a Vrock who was about the same as him or weaker than him. What he wanted to summon was a Bela. Chapter 41. There were all kinds of powerful demons in the abyss. Even the demons who had already obtained the title of Demon Prince could not guarantee that they were the strongest. However, if the definition of powerful was expanded to include all races, then the Baler was without a doubt the strongest Tanar'ri demon. This extremely powerful demon was the same as the pit fiends in the Hell of Bator. Most of the time, they existed in the form of a ruler or a vassal of a more powerful existence. They were a surprise force that could decide the outcome of a small battlefield in the Blood War, a product that satisfied the most terrifying imagination of mortals of the lower realms. Gurgen was indeed a gifted Glabrizu. If he had not been miserably parasitized by worms in the acid fog canyon for more than 100 years, with the power he had been silently accumulating, it was very likely that he would have broken through the shackles of the demon evolution tree and become a member of the powerful Baler race. However, with his strength, if he was willing to provide more magic power or other equivalent offerings when using his innate spell Summon Tanar'ri, he could forcibly summon a Bela, although he generally would not choose such a suicidal act. The last time he summoned a Baler was when he was besieged by the Firewalker and the Cataclysmic Swarm army that had evolved from the acid fogworms. As a result, the Baler that had just appeared casually gave him, the Summoner, a high-level Dispel spell, making all the defensive spells he had prepared on the battlefield ineffective. Although that fellow was finally besieged to death by the acid fogworms because his high-level teleportation spell was restricted, Gurgen survived. However, that kind of powerful summoned creature that was not under his control at all had left a deep lesson for the Glabrizu. However, after being drowned in the high ground of rationality by the tide of anger, Gurgen was close to madness. His appendages forcefully tore off all his roasted and useless Caliceri. The two Caliceri, one big and one small, were offered as a sacrifice for this cross-level summoning. After chanting the summoning code, the Glabrizu's two Caliceri were swallowed by an invisible force. He seemed to hear the crunching sound of his Caliceri being chewed up. Oh, so it's a little crab demon summoning me. You got into trouble and got cooked? Ha! Let me help you return home. Hearing the word return home in the language of the abyss, the beguiling demon turned pale with fright. This word in the language of the abyss did not mean returning to the abyss, but referring to the rebirth of a worm in the blood pool of the abyss due to death. No, Gurgen quickly retreated. He did not want to lose all his power and become an abyssal worm again. Be it crooked mouth Gurgen or charcoal charm, they were all 100 times stronger than living worm Gurgen. However, the resistance of the weak was nothing more than a joke in the eyes of the strong. A finger with a sharp claw reached out from the void of space and pointed at the Glabrizu. There was no strong light or ray. It seemed to be just a casual finger. The Glabriz could not help but use all of her strength and her two remaining appendages to cover her mouth. Internal explosion, a spell-like ability that the powerful Baler could use once a day. It was equivalent to a level 9 spell cast by a level 20 mage. The effect of the spell could be seen from the miserable state of Gurgen, the Glabrizu who could not hold it in. It was like putting a bunch of cluster bombs in the target's body and then detonating them. Even with the strength of the Glabrizu's body, it could not be immune to the huge energy damage caused by the explosion in the body. The Baler's mood seemed to be better after it had sent the coward who dared to summon it back to his hometown. However, when the evil demon noticed where it was and saw the fire giant who was wantonly slaughtering the weak Tanar'ri demons, the good mood disappeared. So, it's because you can't beat those bats of bastards that you dare to summon me to help you. This is really a disgrace to the great abyss. Damn it! The Baler's flame whip swept out and directly strangled the fire giant priest's neck. Although the fire giant was not afraid of fire, the long whip covered with sharp barbs and hard spherical objects still caused great damage to the priest. In pain, the The fire giant priest instinctively wanted to untie the restraint on his neck, but an irresistible force directly pulled him off the ground. A beheading sword like a flame beam cut through the fire giant priest's neck like a hot knife cutting through butter. The giant head with long orange hair flew into the air. In just one blow, the leader of the fire giant team died in the hands of the powerful demon who was only half his height. Ha! The pleasure brought by the slaughter made the flames burning on the horns on the Baler's head more vigorous. It stared at the remaining fire giants on the battlefield and roared in the abyssal language. Order, awe. This was a common tactic used by the Baler. First, they would kill the most powerful leader of the opponent, and then use the spell Command Deterrence to stun the remaining opponents. Finally, they only needed to raise the beheading sword and slash them one by one. Generally, they could end the battle cleanly. Simple and effective. From the perspective of a certain province, the Battle of the Baler was full of violent aesthetics, but no creature wanted to experience this art of destruction. The first to feel the demon's appearance was the demons of the Batsu people. When the Tana reset foot on the land of Avernus, the law of order in this small area seemed to be disturbed. The powerful Baler had temporarily polluted the land by itself. Damn it! How can those bastards summon such a monster? The Baler was so powerful that even the chained demon, who had always been disdainful of the Tana demons, could not help but call a monster. Because of this huge variable, the chained demon, who was extremely nervous, issued the first temporary combat order in the entire battle. Don't care about the other Tana idiots. Fire all Hellscream at the Baler. Cover it with firepower. But it turned out that the hasty decision made under extreme nervousness often led to worse consequences. The Baler was one of the few Tana that was immune to fire, poison, and electric damage at the same time. The fire damage of the Hellscream did not affect it at all, and the kinetic damage of the remaining shells could not completely hit the demon, who moved quickly and used greater teleportation as easily as drinking water. Occasionally, the damage caused by the Baler's strong body was also resisted by the Baler. The physical pain caused by this little damage made the intelligent demon more vigilant, and it began to fight with wisdom instead of instinct. Some in the Tana using greater teleportation, the Baler left the deep pit covered by the cannons, leaving behind a small group of decapitated fire giants. The Baler instantly appeared behind the cannons. Instead of attacking rashly, it chose to use a summoning spell to summon another Baler from the bottomless abyss. All spellcasters and archers, focus fire from afar. All barbed axemen, hold back these two demons. Also, messengers, send out a magical message immediately. Say that a Baler has appeared and ask for reinforcements. The chained demon quickly gave the order, and then spoke to Keys and Riknaz in an uncharacteristically commanding tone. The two of you, the situation on the battlefield has changed greatly. We have to work together to defend against the Tana's counterattack. This is Avernus, and no demon has ever been able to take down a city here. Even if this is just a small, otherworldly mercenary camp, we can't do it. That was what the chained demon added inwardly. He did not dare to imagine, nor did he want to think, what would happen to him, the acting commander of the camp, if this was the first time he had lost a battle in Bador. Even if I have to die, I can't be buried in a pit of maggots and become a brainless lesser demon, or a lowly demon who has lost all 5 senses in a torture chamber. Death is 100 times better than that. To demons, demotion was the most terrifying punishment. Being demoted to a lesser demon or a lowly demon was worse than death. Chapter 42. At this time, Quest naturally did not have any intention of continuing to slack off. In fact, when the Baler appeared, he understood that his side had no other choice but to find a way to defeat this powerful demon. Although the chained demons had already sent the order to report the situation here through magical communication, with the serious bureaucratic style of the demons, without the so-called battle analysis and voting proposal, they would not send troops or senior demons directly to support. However, When Key saw the Baylor slaughtering the fire giant mercenaries like cutting vegetables, he understood that even if he transformed into a megalosaurus, he was no match for these powerful demons who were familiar with fighting. On the contrary, it was possible that due to his size, he would be the first target. I can only hope that the spell casting level of these two demons is not too high, and that they don't have the bonuses of other professions. The Blue Dragon Boy remembered that apart from the strength of these high-ranked demons, some of them were especially powerful and had special advanced professions. If that was the case, with the current strength of his side, it was almost impossible to win. Keys currently had two trump cards. One was the powerful dissociation that he learned from the legendary Megalosaurus Sirota before coming to Bador. After Sirota's modification, this was the most powerful single-target spell under the legendary spell. Keys had always kept it in mind. Even the incarnations of gods and divine creatures would have a certain probability of turning into ashes if they were hit by this powerful dissociation. The second trump card was his newly developed Keys railgun. Currently, he had more than 10,000 rounds of various warheads in the camp's blacksmith shop. The storm formed by the metal bullets should be enough to deal with the Baylor for a while. As long as he was not cut to the back, he could completely act as a cannon and continuously deal damage. However, this required a powerful front line. Keys locked his gaze on mechanical puppet number 21, who was stretching its arms and legs in a strange so-called preparation exercise. He had never thought of letting the ogre narrow charge in front. In fact, other than the mechanical puppet warriors who were almost at the legendary monk level who were qualified to fight the Baylor face-to-face, the others were just sending their heads to the monster. Understood. The greater the power, the greater the responsibility. This is what a good old man said. I don't disagree. Mechanical puppet number 21 noticed Keys's inquiring gaze and did not show any hesitation or refusal. The red light in his metal eye sockets flickered, as if he was looking forward to the fierce battle that was to come. Rick Naz, don't you want to test the prototype? Those two demons look like good test subjects. Before the goblin could reply, a crossbow arrow suddenly shot from a hidden corner. Fortunately, Rick Naz had been holding the small, enchanted umbrella. The surface of the umbrella lightly blocked the crossbow arrow and sent it flying. But this was not the end. From another angle, another crossbow arrow came out. The target was also very clear. It was still the goblin noble who was protected by many half-golem guards. Mechanical puppet number 21, who was quick to react, directly pulled the ocean priestess to block the second sneak attack for the goblin. Although the female Sawajan spellcaster's body was covered in scales and had a good defensive effect, the attack still tore open her skin and flesh. The power of hell attached to the crossbow arrow made her feel extreme pain. She did not dare to fight against number 20 who used her as a shield. The Sawajan poured her anger on the sneak attacker. She raised her hand and used a combat divine spell that she often used, Ghost Bite. Two sharkmen condensed out of thin air, each biting off the heads of the two barbed demons who shot the crossbow arrow. Be careful. This is the Baylor's telekinesis ability. Keys loudly explained to everyone. Although the Baylor was still being focused on by the demon army, this level of battle was not difficult for them. They even had the spare energy to remotely control some miscellaneous soldiers to disrupt the demon commander's formation during the gaps in the battle. Keys suspected that these two demons already had the idea of wiping out this Batsa camp. If not, they would have teleported to the side of the commander of their camp and used the beheading sword and flame whip to vent their terrifying combat power. This deduction did not affect Keys' spellcasting. He used a chaos protection barrier. After the Sawajan ocean priestess healed her wounds, she also recognized the current situation. Needless to say, she added a group elemental damage protection effect to Riknaz, the other half-golem guards, and even the three ogre brothers to prevent the extra damage caused by the Baylor's protective flames during battle. Seeing his army disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye under the slaughter of the two Baylors, the chained demon seemed to have made up his mind. He directly let the two elite barbed demon guards who were loyal to him step out and carried out a promotion ceremony for them in front of everyone. Demons could directly use the power they had accumulated to promote the lower demons who were loyal to them, but they did not have the opportunity to do so. The chained demon went all out in order to increase the power to fight against the Baylor. He had lost everything. With the infusion of sufficient power, the promotion ceremony ended in a few seconds. The two newly promoted chained demons walked out of the ritual circle, looked at each other, and bowed to their original commander to show their loyalty. Immediately launch a general attack. You two. Rush up and replace those barbed demons. Let them stop the other demons first. How could the demons be kind? Giving power for no reason would be compensated with their lives. The two newly promoted chained demons growled and helplessly chose to carry out this mission that had almost no chance of survival. To the demons, the punishment of being demoted was more terrifying than letting them die. Of course, it was not just the two newly promoted chained demons who acted as the tanks in the front line. The chained demon acting commander followed closely behind, and the golem also rushed up after signaling to Riknaz. Neru, who was stimulated by the battle, did not restrain himself. While his brothers were not paying attention, he also rushed directly to the battlefield where the Baylor was fighting. There's no choice. Let's go together. Keys used practical actions to reply to his two ogre companions who were looking at him anxiously. I'm really fated to be a melee fighter. Even if I want to be a mage, I have to be a melee mage. The blue dragon youth did not forget to snatch the spear in the hands of a guard beside him as he charged. He hoped that the secret of increasing luck that had been passed down since ancient times would not let him down. I didn't expect to see the bond between companions in this place. How surprising. The goblin Riknaz recorded a few words on a new scroll and threw it to a half-golem guard. He seemed to be talking to himself. Although Mr. 21 has a body of steel and is invulnerable, the material of the storage box in front of his chest does not seem to be available at that time. The material used is very ordinary. Hearing this sentence, the Sawajan priestess seemed to have been hit by a spell. Her body stiffened. When she released the group elemental damage spell just now, she seemed to have missed a fellow that she hated so much, and that fellow had her heart hidden in his body. If he was killed by the Baylor or captured like that, wouldn't it mean that she had also fallen into the hands of that existence? The female, Sawajan, who instantly thought of this felt as if her fate was being choked by the throat. She could not help but let out a high-pitched scream. She looked resentfully at the goblin noble who was hiding in the center of the half-golem guard's encirclement. Then, she could only accept her fate and rush into the battle. Chapter 43. The enemy will reach the battlefield in 30 seconds. Mechanical puppet number 21 was still the first wave to reach the battlefield. After it habitually issued an electronic voice that seemed to remind the Baylor, it did not hesitate to hit the opponent's face with its iron fist. But Keys, who heard its strange words, felt more and more that he needed to find time to talk to it. The Baylor, whose face was punched by number 21, went crazy under the sneers of its companions. It abandoned the barbed demon, sword-shielded soldiers that it was slaughtering and went straight to the enemy, who seemed to be wearing full armor. It roared in the language of the abyss. Iron Boy, you're looking for death. Is this a standard sentence for demons? The golem dodged the Baylor's embrace and bypassed his open arms. Its iron fists with thorns on them were like inflatable hammers that continuously hit the strong demon's weak armpits. The thorns pierced into the demon's flesh, and the sinister barbs on the surface tore off a large piece of flesh. The immense pain caused the demon to let go of the flaming whip that it was holding. The raging flames that protected its body seemed to be boiling as it exploded from its body. The shockwave disrupted number 21's combo attack, and the demon's beheader sword was now stabbing at number 21's chest. No. Seeing this scene, the Sawajan priest was scared out of her wits. She did not have time to think and quickly released an ice wall. A thick ice wall directly appeared between the tip of the beheading sword and number 20's chest. This level of ice wall could not resist the Baylor's strange strength, but there was still a slight delay in his movements. The mechanical puppet warrior seemed to have no hindrance in its joints. Its upper body twisted, and its arms that had hidden sharp blades spun like a meat grinder. With the demon's body as the axis, it turned half a circle and took away a large piece of flesh. At this time, the other Baylor also knew that it had met a strong opponent. It no longer sneered at its own kind, but found the right time to aim at the mechanical puppet warrior and threw out its flame whip. They did not have the spirit of a knight in a one-on-one fight. Sneak attacks were nothing out of the ordinary for the Baylor, but there was a deviation in his long whip. An unusually strong ogre jumped high and grabbed the ankle of the Baylor flying in the air, and the huge weight dragged him to the ground. Under the effect of Keys's dragon strength and bull strength, Nera's strength and defense were greatly improved for a limited time. This ogre actually used his ebony flail to hurt the other leg of the Baylor that was about to kick his head. The Baylor let out a painful howl. In pain, the abyssal demon flapped its giant bat wings a few times to stop itself from falling. Then he controlled the flame whip to bind Neru, who was constantly waving the ebony flail, trying to bring more damage to his lower body. With a ferocious expression on his face, the Baylor held the hilt of the beheading sword with both hands and stabbed at the ogre that was holding his ankle. Unfortunately, this action was interrupted again. The ogre wizard, who had entered the battle, shot an acid ball from the troll's skull staff and hit the Baylor. The strong acid and quick-acting adhesive covered the demon's arms that were holding the beheading sword. The damage caused by the strong acid hurt the Baylor. But what annoyed him more was that the quick-acting adhesive quickly hardened and covered all the joints that exerted force. No matter how strong he was, it was difficult to use it. It was as if he was hit by a petrification spell, which made him almost unable to move for a moment. The beheading sword that was about to stab out could only stay at the fingertips of both hands. When he was about to burst out the flames to burn the disgusting mucus that made him unable to move for a while, a sharp blade appeared from behind him. The ogre blue had been invisible and was floating in the air, ready to launch a fatal blow. The Baylor had constant eyes that could see through most invisibility, illusion, and transformation spells, but he did not have omniscient vision. Therefore, Blue, who always had ideas, came up with a good idea. In the continuous battle, the ogre mage approached the Baylor carefully from the blind spot of the Baylor's vision, like a clever assassin. When he handed out his wailing harpoon, the sharp blade was less than 1 meter away from the target's brain. However, the experienced Baylor adjusted his body in time to prevent this fatal blow. At the most critical moment, the strong Baylor turned his head and used his sharp teeth to bite the blade of the wailing harpoon. The experience of life and death stimulated this demon. Originally, it was summoned by another Baylor to enjoy the slaughter, but it did not expect to meet such a difficult opponent. The great sense of crisis made it explode with strength, and the muscles all over its body swelled. It held its breath and used all its strength to break free from the binding of the adhesive. Flames erupted from his body, not only incinerating the remaining acid and glue, but also causing Neru, the ogre that had been clinging to his ankle, to let go of him in pain. Internal explosion spell. He was a Thanner Re-demon that was summoned to assist in the battle. Except for the Summon Thanner Re-spell, which was restricted and could not be used, other powerful abilities, such as the internal explosion spell, could be freely used. In the current battle situation, whether it was to vent his anger or to quickly reverse the situation, he had to use the internal explosion spell, which could only be used once a day, in order to achieve the effect of a hammer strike. But why did the ogre, who had failed the sneak attack and retreated quickly, seem to be mocking him? The Baylor used its constant eyes that could see the ogre carefully and did not find the ogre's illusion or transformation spells. Then, why did the ogre dare to face an abyss overlord like him? Was there something that he had not thought of? It seemed that a blue dragon who had not yet reached adulthood was preparing this electric shock spell. But did he not know that the Thanner Re-demons were immune to electric shocks? There was a loud bang. This was the sound of an oval-shaped cannonball exploding after breaking through the sound barrier. Under the effect of the strong electric field that Keyes had been accumulating for a while, a metal warhead, with an initial speed close to 30 times the speed of sound, was shot out instantly. In order to make up for the negative bonus of his body tracing master, Keyes did not hesitate to use a variety of spells. Eagle Eye to increase the aiming effect, Guidance to improve the stability of the warhead's flight trajectory, First Strike to increase the probability of hitting. Under the blessing of multiple spell effects, this metal warhead that had spontaneously combusted due to the friction in the air was like the most lame PUBG player using a headlock cheat. Without a doubt, it directly bombarded the head of the Baylor. Capture, limit, backstab, snipe, these were the serial attacks that Keyes had prepared for this powerful Baylor. A soul-piercing super electromagnetic gun directly blasted the demon's head into pieces that filled the sky. Keyes and the others retreated even faster. Be careful of burning explosion. To some extent, this was the Baylor's talent spell with the highest damage. After being killed, their bodies would turn into small, tactical nuclear bombs, and a violent explosion would play the strongest sound in the glorious and heroic life of this demon. With Keyes' reminder, the three Ogre brothers all retreated quite far away. The flames that always burned on the surface of the Baylor's body that had lost its head seemed to have extinguished, and the flames flowed back into the demon's dead body from every pore. The muscles of the body that had dimmed in color swelled a few times and suddenly released the most powerful explosion. Everything within a 30-meter radius, including the thick, rocky ground of Avernus, had been wiped away. Before they could completely withdraw, some of the barbed demons that were unfortunately involved were torn apart by the shockwave of the explosion, even though they had fire immunity. This was just like the big explosion that the chained demons gave to the demon army on the city wall, and the power was even more powerful. Chapter 44. The Baylor demon did not know if the demons understood the concept of fireworks turned cold, but it felt a chill when it saw the huge fireworks set off by its summoned companion. Under the direct attack of mechanical puppet number 21, the harassment of the three Bat-Chain demons, and the support of a Sawajan priest divine spell, the Baylor demon could barely hold on, but it was showing signs of defeat. I can't let it go on like this. From the corner of its eye, it saw that the young blue dragon was preparing to kill its companion with a wave of powerful spray spells. The Baylor demon knew that it had to make a decision immediately. With a wave of its hand, it summoned a cloud of death that emitted poison and plague to cover the entire battlefield. This cloud of death prevented others from joining the battle, and at the same time, it hindered Keyes' ability to aim, which was lacking in experience. Other than the mechanical puppet, the chained demons and Sawajan sorcerers who were affected retreated while casting spells such as Dispel Disease on themselves. One of the two new chained demons did not seem to be good at casting spells and could only resist the effects of the poison. After a while, it was infected by the strengthened version of the cloud of death summoned by the Baylor demon. Its body was wrapped in chains and covered in sores. Soon it died. Use the wind spell to disperse this cloud of death. Keyes was maintaining the charge of his railgun. He wanted to fire the heavy, oval-shaped warhead, but with his ability, he could not create a powerful electric field in an instant. He reminded the Sawajan priest loudly. Blue the Ogre had not figured out how to simulate the effect of the wind spell due to the problem of his spell-casting system. The Sawajan who was reminded wanted to cast a spell, but it saw the Baylor demon laughing at it. Not good. The Sawajan who mistakenly thought that the demon was going to attack it did not release the wind spell. Instead, it summoned a water elemental guard in front of it. Idiot! The Baylor demon and the blue dragon who were dealing with the attacks of the mechanical puppet thought of this word in their minds. Number 21's attack was all-pervasive. The Baylor demon had just released the cloud of death and suffered a few attacks, and it used a few new wounds on its body in exchange for the time to cast the spell. The demon's advanced teleportation ability had long been restricted by the space-sealing magic circle on the chain of the chained demon commander. Otherwise, the two Baylors would not be in a tough fight. Seeing that its intimidation method had succeeded, the Baylor risked adding a few more wounds, exchanging injuries for lives. It used a fierce wind slash to finish off another newly advanced chain demon. After completing this tactical surprise attack, the demon finally had the chance to focus on the attacks of the mechanical puppet. Everyone else, including the chained demon commander who blocked his teleportation ability, could not give him too much pressure. Amber sarcophagus. The Baylor turned his fist into a palm and held number 21's iron fist tightly. He did not care if his skin was torn. This spell had to be in contact with the opponent to take effect. A huge mass of amber was summoned out of thin air by the spell, enveloping the mechanical puppet and quickly hardening. However, this sarcophagus made of translucent amber did not seem to be able to make the mechanical puppet lose its resistance. High heat burst out from every crack of the mechanical puppet's body, gradually melting and hardening the amber. Maze! The demon, of course, had a backup plan. He allowed the enemy to add dozens of wounds to him in exchange for a chance to cast the spell, so that he could banish this powerful mechanical puppet with terrifying close combat ability. Casting the maze, a level 8 spell, originally required about 10 minutes of preparation, but this Baylor demon only used one hand gesture to complete the entire casting process. There was no doubt that he was a well-hidden warlock. He speculated that this demon might also be a spellcaster who specialized in spells. When casting spells of this school, it might even be comparable to the level of a legendary mage. After completing the maze, he casually summoned 2 Boda corpses, confirming Key's speculation. The 2 Boda corpses jumped and rushed towards the Sawajan priest who was casting the wind spell, and the blue dragon who was preparing the railgun. Then, the demon focused his attention on the only remaining chained demon on the battlefield. As long as I get rid of this Batsa bastard, I can use the advanced teleportation spell, and the initiative of the battle will be back in my hands. As expected of the Baylor demon, who was known as the strongest demon, the entire tactical deployment of the desperate counterattack was as smooth as flowing water. If he did not see it with his own eyes, it would be hard to believe that such a cunning demon could emerge from the chaotic evil camp that had been full of idiots since ancient times. However, those who faced this demon directly were in trouble. The chained demon commander was now in despair. The whole situation of the battle had taken a huge turn, which made him, a Batsid demon who was in the lawful camp, feel extremely uncomfortable. However, as he shouldered the responsibility of guarding the territory, he could not choose to turn and run at the risk of being demoted to a lowly demon. In fact, he could not escape. After the Baylor demon ordered the summoned Boda corpses to attack the spellcaster, it directly found this cowardly and cunning demon who had just put him in a dangerous situation where he could only fight with the mechanical monster. After losing the shackles of number 21's exquisite martial arts, the Baylor demon's strength that it was proud of had returned to its body. The weak chained demon in front of it waved its thorny chain like a group of floating seaweed. Even if the seaweed suddenly extended and exploded, wrapping itself into a cocoon made of chains, and the snake-like chains constantly tried to use their fangs to cut its skin, it still looked so ridiculous. As if it thought of something funny, the Baylor demon's ear-piercing laughter came out of the steel cocoon. At the same time, a giant hand covered in dense scales came out of the cocoon. With one hand, it tore apart the wrapping of the chains and grabbed the chain demon that dared to play these tricks. The Baylor demon's beheading sword swung in a circle, and who knew how many chains were broken into 2 halves. Lifting the struggling demon in front of its eyes and looking at the chains that were constantly being melted by the flames protecting its body, the demon cruelly used the beheading sword as a dagger and inserted it into the chained demon's body bit by bit. Enjoying the moment of abuse that it had obtained with great difficulty, suddenly, something that looked like a bomb with a burning fuse was thrown in front of it. The vigilant Baylor demon was not careless. In an instant, it pulled out the beheading sword from the chained demon's body and slashed hard on this strange object. The bomb still exploded, but the power was not as great as the demon expected. The beheading sword he held with one hand did not even tremble because of the slash. However, The real threat of this bomb was not the impact of the explosion at all. Or rather, only a small part of the damage came from this. Light, holy light, glorious light, all of the positive energy words that could be used to describe light were piled up together, and an indescribably intense radiance erupted in Bator, in Avernus, in Devil's Town, and in front of this abyssal demon. Oh, my eyes hurt. What is this thing? Whether it was the Baylor demon who was proud of turning the tide of the battle, or the chained demon commander who was being tortured to the brink of death, both of them could withstand the damage of the strong light due to their evil alignment. Even with the Baylor demon's strong physique, it was still dizzy from the strong light. A goblin dazzling light bomb filled with 5 quarts, which is 3 pints of the blazing angel's feathers. It's an honorary product of the Wrench family company. The one who answered the questions of the demons was the goblin Renaz, who had hidden within the defensive circle of the half-golems when the battle began. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.